All right, welcome to the third hearing of the committee's inquiry into the impact of the Rozelle Interchange. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I also acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. My name is Kate Fairman and I am chair of the committee. I ask everyone in the room to please turn their mobile phones to silent. Parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses in relation to the evidence they give today. However, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of the hearing. I urge witnesses to be careful about making any comments to the media or to others after completing their evidence. In addition, the Legislative Council has adopted rules to provide procedural fairness for inquiry participants. I encourage committee members and witnesses to be mindful of these procedures. So welcome and thank you for making the time to give evidence today. So could each witness, starting from my left, so with you, Mr. Ford, please state your name and position title and swear either an oath or affirmation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Chris Ford. I'm retired. I'm formerly the Director of Traffic and Transport of the Roads and Traffic Authority. I'll make the affirmation now.
Thank you.
I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Mr. Willinger. You don't need to, we'll just get the microphones probably pulled a bit closer to everybody, and you don't need to press anything. They're on the whole time.
Right, my name's Les Willinger. I'll make the oath now. I swear the evidence about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thanks, Mr. Willinger. Mr. Forward.
Okay. Thank you. I just swear the oath. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you so much, Mr. McCreary.
And my name's Stuart McCreary. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. Okay, now there is provision for a short opening statement. Is one of you making that? Okay, Mr. Forward.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that members have received our submission.
And just that is now public,
Yes.
and it's on the committee's website.
So I won't go through that word for word. However, there are a number of points that I like to make that are actually in the submission, and I think these are important points for the committee to understand. Can I just say on opening that all four of us have extensive experience in working, planning, procuring, delivering and operating complex large-scale infrastructure projects, particularly in the transport sector. Three of us, Chris, Stuart and I, worked on WestConnex from 2011, 2012 to 2015. During this time, Les Willinger was establishing Transport for New South Wales. In 2011, with the election of the O'Farrell coalition government, Infrastructure New South Wales was established. And they were given the task of developing for New South Wales a 30-year infrastructure plan. Stuart and I were approached by Infrastructure New South Wales and asked to prepare a document advising them on the next road project for New South Wales for Sydney. That was the beginning of WestConnex. At the same time, and even before that time, the Roads and Traffic Authority of New South Wales were working on a very detailed motorway strategy for Sydney. We were not privy to their work. However, both documents had very similar objectives. That is, both documents were trying to improve the connectivity from Western Sydney to the airport and to Port Botany. Both documents recognised that the Anzac Bridge was running at peak capacity. Both documents recognised that any strategy should not put any more traffic onto the Anzac Bridge. the RTA were also looking at a different alignment for a second or third harbour crossing. And that alignment went up through the Gladesville Bridge, up through the M2, providing improved connectivity from the northwest sector onto the ports. That was their preferred alignment, not the Western Harbour Tunnel, and certainly not Beaches Link. The documents that Chris and I prepared, and Stuart, are available on the Infrastructure New South Wales website. They were published in 2012. They are still available. Now, Infrastructure New South Wales were keen to get innovation into this project. The plan that we had come up with was a high-level plan. They wanted more detail, and what we decided to do was to engage Australia's best road designers, which also included some of the best road designers in the world. We had French and Spanish road designers. 4 consortiums were invited to participate in this detail exercise. The 4 consortiums were split up into 2 groups. One group looking at the southern part of the motorway and one group looking at the northern part of the motorway. The southern part of the motorway was pretty well what is now being built. That is the M8, the St Peters Interchange, the connections to the port and the airport. The northern section, what was recommended by the world's best road designers, was very different to what's being built today. Can I say there was no Rozelle interchange? The mainline tunnel was much further south, and there was connectivity to the southern part of the city around Camperdown. Now, this was seen as important because it provided a link to Sydney University, Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, UTS, Notre Dame University was expanding at the time. It was also a link to the growing Redfern Waterloo redevelopment area, and there was a lot of talk at the time, as there always is, about building over the railway line at Central to Redfern. And so the connectivity there was seen as an important part of this particular project. We then formed an expert review group which involved people from Infrastructure New South Wales, Transport for New South Wales, RMS, and Urban Growth also got involved as well because they were very keen about the Bays Precinct and what would happen to the Bays Precinct if there was any motorway construction in that area. We looked at the area around the southern part of the motorway and felt that what the consultants had come up with was an excellent design, and as I said, that design was then ultimately built. We then looked at the northern design. We were quite happy with that northern design. However, people from Transport New South Wales started to question the connectivity of that and the connectivity to the Anzac Bridge and the connectivity to the city. 15 different options were developed for that northern section. The 15 different options all had traffic modelling undertaken for them. WestConnex has had more traffic modelling undertaken than any other road project in Sydney. What the traffic modelling demonstrated was that connecting to the Anzac Bridge would in fact overload the Anzac Bridge. What is happening now was predicted in the traffic modelling. We then went through a very extensive analysis of the different options, and in 2015 the Evans and Peck team of Chris, Stuart and I were told that our services were no longer required, and other consultants took over that particular role. In 2016, when we were no longer involved, so we dropped out in 2015. In 2016, other consultants were engaged. Various changes took place, including the removal of the Camperdown ramps, the movement of the motorway, the mainline tunnel further north, and the connections to the Anzac Bridge, which I must add showed that in fact it would be overloaded. the traffic models within Transport for New South Wales and the private sector traffic models of Massey, Wilson and 20 all predicted what is happening now. It should not have come as any surprise. If the committee wants to see how the change has evolved over time, I draw your attention to the Auditor General's report of 2021. There's some excellent diagrams there which demonstrate how this motorway has changed over time. Now, I just want to add 2 further thoughts here, and then we're obviously open to question time. I think an important consideration for the committee is to understand that the model for delivering WestConnex is very different to all the previous toll road models in Sydney. Up to this point, all the toll roads in Sydney were developed at no or very little cost to government. The private sector took the traffic risk, the private sector took the construction risk, and the private sector took the financial risk. They were all funded off balance sheet. Treasury liked this approach because there was no financial implications for the state budget. WestConnex is different. WestConnex, the government took the traffic risk, the construction risk, and the financial risk. They developed a single asset entity to deliver the motorway. Now, it's undergone a number of different name changes, but it started out as the Westlink Development Corporation, and then it morphed into the Sydney Motorway Corporation. It had a private sector board, but it also had people from Treasury, Transport for New South Wales and RMS on that board. The aim of the exercise was then to build the motorway using government funds. Once the motorway was built and operational, it would then be sold to the private sector. Now, Treasury had 2 particular interests at this stage. One was clearly to try and reduce the cost of the motorway, which were getting bigger and bigger every year. And secondly, to raise the most amount of money for that motorway. The models that we had a look at demonstrated that by pushing the traffic onto the Anzac Bridge, remember you've got 14 lanes going into 4 on the Anzac Bridge, actually generated more traffic on the motorway, which meant the motorway was more valuable as an asset when it was sold. Now, we also hear that the Western Harbour Tunnel will help resolve this problem. I've got to say, all 4 of us have doubts about that. With the Western Harbour Tunnel, we will have 14 lanes, not going into 4 lanes, but going into 6 lanes. The modelling that we did and that the private sector did demonstrated that there will be some relief, but not sufficient relief to actually address the congestion problems on the Anzac Bridge. We're also concerned about the absolute design of the Western Harbour Tunnel. We now have 3 motorways, Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Harbour Tunnel and the Western Harbour Tunnel, all coming onto the Warringah Freeway at very similar locations. Have a look at the work that's underway now on the Warringah Freeway. And the question clearly to the committee is this another Rozelle interchange about to happen? We are now happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forward, and the committee really appreciates and thanks all of you for making the time and approaching the committee to give your evidence today, which is of course extremely valuable given your experience with this project. It must have been, no doubt, a big decision for you all to make to come before this committee today. Why did you decide to come forward and expose in some ways what has happened? Mr. Willinger, I'll go to you first.
I'm the fault of that, unfortunately. About 2 weeks ago, I realised how bad the intersection was behaving. I couldn't believe it had gone on for 4 or 5 months, and I felt that I had to come in and explain what was going on. So I did my own assessment, like I'd been appointed Director General, and I can talk to that if you want me to.
So, Mr. Willinger, you thank you. You said a couple of weeks ago, you said things were so bad that you wanted to do this. What do you mean by that?
Well, I live up on the Central Coast, not in Sydney anymore, so I wasn't picking up on all the media, but I picked it up off YouTube one night. I went through all the complaints people were having about the site, and I thought, this can't be right. There's no way any government department will build a piece of rubbish like this. So,
But it was built. Your evidence today is that at some point all of the good planning and decision making and expertise was thrown out the window, it seemed, for Rozelle Interchange. Is
Well,
that correct, Mr. Willinger?
yeah, I got treated bad, worse than these blokes did, because part of the powers that Infrastructure New South Wales had was they could take projects away from us and run them. Now, I lost the complete project, and, the arguments I'm having, was having with Infrastructure New South Wales at the time was in the media everywhere. And, so you knew where I stood on this, but there is an answer to fix this bloody intersection, and we can talk about that in a while too.
Perhaps, Chair, if I could make a comment. One of the problems with government organisations is over time they lose the corporate memory. And I was concerned that over time Transport for New South Wales had lost that corporate memory. We were involved virtually full time. When I say we, Stuart, Chris and I, with a small team from the different agencies, were involved in this project for about 4 years. So we had a lot at stake in terms of the intellectual effort we put in to helping to design this motorway, and we relied upon the best consultants that were available, traffic modellers, engineers, etc. And we thought that this was a particularly important inquiry, and that were clear lessons that could be learned from our involvement in it. And so, even though we are all retired, we thought it was of some benefit for the committee to hear what we had experienced during this time.
Thank you. So, your submission and your opening statement made the point a number of times about the 15 different options that were being considered. I think this is for stage 3, what was ultimately stage 3B, or just stage 3?
Stage 3.
Yes, stage 3. And how much traffic modelling was undertaken for those stages, and that they all of that traffic modelling for those 15 different options, or the traffic modelling found that the Anzac Bridge would suffer. Is that right? Could you explain you said pushing traffic onto Anzac Bridge, 14 lanes to 4, that would generate traffic. There was no other end point but more traffic onto Anzac Bridge?
No. Let me just clarify. Thank you for that question. The 15 different options involved different designs to the motorway, to stage 3, as you say. And traffic modelling was done for each of those 15 different designs. Some of those, in fact, all of those designs had a different impact on the Anzac Bridge. The Anzac Bridge, it was well known, was that critical bit of infrastructure. So it was no surprise that we focused on the impact on the Anzac Bridge. But I would ask perhaps Chris Ford, who is arguably, I would say, one of Australia's best traffic engineers and was responsible for traffic management in the RTA while I was Chief Executive, perhaps to comment on the different modelling that was done in terms of the traffic impact.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Yes, in 2015, June 2015, I was involved in the preparation of a stage 3 business case traffic report. And that report clearly showed that Anzac Bridge, under all the scenarios we talked about, would be operating at capacity during the morning peak in the forecast year of 2031, to a point where the volumes involved with the modelling were actually higher than what currently existed in 2012. Now, I've indicated in the document I've put forward that the robustness of that conclusion needs to be verified with current demand modelling, because on the face of it, what we see out there, as Paul indicated, was what was clearly modelled in 2014. Now, if just looking at numbers for a moment, the 2012 morning peak trips, for example, on Anzac Bridge were running at about 9,800 vehicles. The model showed that would increase to 10,800 to 12,000, depending on what scenario you looked at. The daily traffic, about 142,700 in the year in 2012, increasing significantly to 160, almost up to 200,000 in the forecast year of 2031. They are significant changes that the modelling, in fact, produced. Now, I don't plan to go into every scenario that was looked at because we haven't got the time for that. But as a brief overview, what I'm suggesting here is the issues that we see today were very clearly established in the modelling in 2014.
So what was being suggested, thank you, what was being suggested at the time then to prevent the type of congestion that was being predicted to hit Anzac Bridge, that we're seeing hit Anzac Bridge as a result of what was ultimately built? So what was being suggested? Not to do it in the first place?
At that time,
Go, Mr. Ford, and we can answer. We can go along if you like, Mr. Ford. If you continue, then we'll go to you, Mr. Wallinger.
what I was going to suggest there was our role, my role at that time, was involved with other traffic modellers to make an assessment for the West Connect Authority on the traffic implications of what was being proposed in Stage 3.
Okay.
We were not tasked with taking it to the next step.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Wallinger, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, I do. Look, you can do this traffic assessment yourself. Every urban arterial road carries a maximum of about 1,800 vehicles per hour. And you can match that up with the lane configuration. So 12 lots of 1,800 vehicles per hour doesn't fit into 4.
Yes. I think
Simply
every
that-
member of the public has been able to work out that 14 lanes into 4 is going to cause a huge amount of congestion. They don't have to be a traffic modeller. In fact, the question is around, clearly a lot of people knew that this was going to happen. It seems everybody in government did know.
Yeah.
So the solution was not to build it in the first place, I'm assuming. It wasn't recommended. That's what you're saying,
Perhaps if
Mr.
I could
Forward.
comment, Chair. The modelling demonstrated that the ramps at Camperdown assisted in terms of the impact on the Anzac Bridge. Now, I just want people to understand what these ramps were going to look like, because I think within transport there was a bit of sort of, shall I say, skullduggery about these ramps. If you take the Eastern Distributor and you look at the on-ramp on the northern end of Anzac Parade, in what's known as Driver's Triangle, it's a very subtle ramp onto the Eastern Distributor. There's 2 off-ramps, one in Moore Park Road and also an off-ramp in Anzac Parade as well, that subtly fit into the urban fabric. We had an architect design those ramps, an architect by the name of David Chesterman, who was one of Sydney's leading architects at the time. So the ramps at Camperdown would have been designed similarly to the ramps on the Anzac Bridge, the Eastern Distributor motorway. So that intersection at Camperdown was vital to make sure that the Anzac Bridge would not be overloaded. It was dropped. It was dropped in about 2016. The Auditor General makes the comment, and I think it's sort of an interesting comment the Auditor General makes, is that Transport for New South Wales documented but did not publish the rationale for the design changes. That was done, that's in the Auditor General report of 2021. So I think it's a very interesting document for the committee to see if it's available, is that where is the documentation for these design changes that happened in 2016? What is the rationale?
Yeah.
We were told that we were no longer required 2015. There were a lot of changes that happened in 2016 that we were not privy to.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I just ask where that ramp, the Camperdown ramp was proposed for? What intersection?
The Camperdown, well, perhaps Stuart might be able to elaborate on the
Yeah,
Camperdown
maybe we
ramp.
can go. Why don't we go? We've got, we'll just go to questions from the opposition and we can answer that later.
Sure.
Ms Natalie Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming along today and for your assistance with the committee's inquiry and your submission, which is very helpful. Can I just ask for each of you, I think you've referred to it in your submission, but for each of you, could you just inform the committee when was the last time you were formally involved in the West Connects project?
Yeah, I retired in 2013. I hadn't had any involvement in West Connex up until that point.
Thank you, Mr Willinger. Mr Ford?
2015 June.
Thank you.
I can't give you the exact date or month, but it was early 2015.
Thank you. I'm not fussed about the exact date, but thank you for that.
And for me, it just depends on how you define WestConnex. WestConnex originally had a connection to the airport, which has now been delivered as Gateway.
Yeah.
So I did have involvement in Gateway in 2018, but prior to that on WestConnex it was 2015.
So pretty much, and I think that's consistent with the submission that most of you, apart from you, Mr Willinger, 2013 were 2015, and then you had perhaps some ongoing involvement in Gateway after 2015.
Only in 2018.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. At what stage was WestConnex up to at that point, of your involvement in 2015, for each of you?
I think stage 1A and 1B, so that's the M4 East extension and the first parts of the tunnel, they were under construction. Stage 2 was in construction, but stage 3 was still being developed.
So 1 and 2 for you, yep, Mr.
I have the same recollection. I mean, we were, Stuart and I were working daily on this project.
Yes, I just want to be clear for the committee though about what stages you were involved in.
We were involved in...
Stage 1 and 2 also?
Look, we were involved in all 3 stages, but we didn't have a lot of involvement in stages 2 and 1 and 2. Stages 1 is an extension of the M4 East.
Yeah.
We did have a lot of overview of the design, what they were coming up with, etc. But it's very similar to what the traffic engineers from the private sector had designed. Very similar.
So
At
2015
Parramatta,
you're-
where it splits and there's a viaduct and whatever, you're probably familiar with it.
Somewhat.
That wasn't all that controversial. And so was the stage 2 works, what's now the M8. We did a review of that, and once again, it was put forward by the international traffic designers.
Sure,
and
we'll
road
get to
designers.
that. I just want to be
So
clear
it was
about the
stage
timeline.
3.
So
Stage
you
3,
were-
we spent most of our time.
So you were involved in 1, 2 and stage 3
Yes.
up to 2015.
Less involved in 1, more involved in 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr Willinger?
Me? Well, the last I saw of West Connex was that it was going to do the southern bit first as a construction, get the right traffic split to where the old M4 came on to the new one between Parramatta Road, and then another one with them going south and the rest going into the city via the boulevard.
Okay.
That's my last memory of the project.
Thank you. Mr Ford?
Stage 3.
Stage
The traffic impact assessment, stage 3.
Okay, thank you. So at the time of that involvement for each of you, was the traffic modelling, the original traffic modelling for WestConnex complete?
Can I comment? In the
I think each of you, like, given your involvement in each
Yeah.
part, it would be helpful to understand.
So in the evolution of the strategic studies for stage 2 and stage 3, we would get together a group of people, meet on a regular basis, have it up on a whiteboard, what the connectivity might be, where the ramps might come out, how big they might be. Then the modellers would go away and model that and come back at the next meeting and explain to us what the ramifications of that would be, and we'd say, as a group, we'd say, maybe we should change something, and we'd evolve it. So that's where the 15 options came from.
Is that your recollection, Mr. Ford?
Yes, and look, I should add here that Chris was part of our team. Chris is a very experienced traffic modeller, but Chris wasn't doing the traffic modelling. Traffic modelling was done by a team from Masson, Wilson and 20, probably the best traffic modellers in Australia.
Sure.
worked on it.
I'm just
And-
limited for
and
time,
can
so
I
I'm going
just
to
say-
direct you back. I'm just going to say, so were you aware, did you see a final version of traffic modelling, or was that an ongoing process? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, it was
from the
more an
timeline.
ongoing process
All right, Mr.
for
Willinger, was
looking
that...
at all the different options.
Okay, Mr. Willinger.
So whether you call it the final, well, it was certainly the final for some of the options because the options were then dropped.
Right. Mr. Willinger? Sorry, Mr. Willinger, was the traffic... Did you see final traffic modelling for the time that you were involved?
No, I didn't. As I said, the project was taken off me and given to Infrastructure New South
Okay.
Wales.
Yep. It's not a trick question. I'm just trying to line up the facts about what timing and where the traffic modelling was at each of those iterations, Mr. Ford.
Well, I was excluded to the extent that I had to resign from their board.
Thank you.
Because they weren't letting me tell my minister what was going on at the time.
All right, Mr. Ford.
Who was your minister at the time, just to be clear?
Gladys Berejiklian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my involvement, as I mentioned earlier, was up to June 2015.
Yeah.
I was involved in having having an assessment, if you like, of some of the modelling that was done for stage 3. But that modelling, by and large, was done internally by another project team within WestConnect.
All right.
Yep.
So can I get to stage 3 then? It seems that at some point, stage 3 changed.
Yes.
There were different options. Stage 3 changed. There must have been a point at which there was a decision come to. Did any of you have direct experience in the change for stage 3?
What,
Can I
on
comment?
any project?
For stage 3 specifically?
So as I recall it, we did a strategic design in 2015 for stage 3, excluding connections to the CBD and excluding the Western Harbour Tunnel. Then we did a supplementary report, which included what was termed at the time the inner link, which became the Western Harbour Tunnel.
Okay.
So at the end of 2015, or in the last Q3 or Q4, that's when we did a supplementary report on that bit.
Okay. And what were the reasons, in your experience then, looking at that change, what were the reasons underpinning those changes?
So the objectives changed from the original ones that Paul described, which was to get trucks from Western Sydney to the ports, to include two other aspirations, objectives. One was to connect to the CBD and one was to connect to a possible future Western Harbour Tunnel.
And so your involvement in that, did that involve modelling as well? So there was a change to design, let's extend it, look at these
Yeah.
options.
For that supplementary report, we developed more than the 15 options. There was another 3 or 4, something like that, in that process. And then we did a supplementary report on that basis with 2 recommendations.
Okay. And so then the objectives changed around the project and the design changed, is that correct?
It changed from the original one, which
Yeah.
was on a completely different alignment. So yes, it did change.
Yeah, okay. And you were involved in that change, but the rest of you gentlemen were not involved at that point, at the change of design and...
No, we were not involved in that change.
Okay.
We were recommending against it
Sure.
because we saw the damage it was going to do to the Anzac Bridge.
Understand. I've got
So
1
there were
minute left,
two-
so I'm going to
there-
redirect you. Thank you very much, but I've just got limited time. So I just want to be clear about the objective and direction change on that. But you made recommendations, but you weren't involved in that part of the process. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct. The
Thank you.
change at the end was made, as we understand it, by Sydney Motorway Corporation Board.
Thank you. And
with
in your
advice
submission...
from the department. The finance people in the department made
Thank
that
you,
advice.
Mr Ford. I do have 1 minute left, so I might just go back to my questions. You're welcome to put further information later if you'd like. So you note in your submission that the world's best traffic designers did not come up with the Rozelle interchange concept, and you've said, do you want to just clarify on that point then perhaps who did come up with that design?
We were working as part of an expert review group, and there were representatives in that expert review group from Transport for New South Wales, RMS. And
So it's Transport, essentially, a group.
Transport were part of it.
Yep, and who designed that? Was that Transport for New South Wales?
I think one of the consultants to Transport saw there were some advantages in using the Rozelle goods yard
Yep, just
as,
who
as a
designed
construction
it?
point. So
I've
my
got
understanding
20
was it was
seconds left.
Transport. Transport
Transport.
came up with that design.
Okay. So Transport had ownership of the design, you would say?
Well, I'm not sure I'd use the word ownership, but yes, they were the ones who were promoting it.
Okay.
But it would have been SMC at the time.
It would have been the Sydney Motorway Corporation,
All right.
the company that was set up to deliver this project.
So if the Rozelle interchange is the incorrect... All right, well, I'll come back to that, Chair.
Okay, questions from government members? Mr Namber?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've since learnt that the Sydney Motorway Corporation was privatised for approximately $21 billion.
Sorry, can you speak up? I can't quite
Yep,
hear
we've
you.
since
Microphone up a bit, Bob. It's just down a bit.
Yep. We've since learned that the Sydney Motorway Corporation was privatised for $21 odd billion. Is it your view that WestConnex's delivery model, as well as the significant redrafting of the motorway strategy and ultimately its design from the original concepts, was influenced in some part by increasing the number of toll trips and essentially fattening the pig for sale?
It was my view that the final design was an attempt to maximise the value of the motorway when it was put out for sale, because it had a larger number of toll trips on it than some of the previous options.
In 2014, if I'm following the timeline in your submission correctly, in 2014 there was a fundamental change to the motorway strategy. In 2015, the design had been changed to what had previously been prepared and reviewed, particularly with respect to stage 3, contrary to the previous work of the RMS, the expert review group, the consultants that have been brought in, and the designers. Who made that decision, or on whose advice was that decision made? Was it the Sydney Motorway Corporation or the WestConnex Delivery Authority? Was it a minister?
Can I suggest, and I'm not being flippant here, but that's a question you should ask the people in the Sydney Motorway Corporation. We were not part of this process. We were, in 2015, we were edged out. They didn't like the advice we were giving.
So you had no visibility on who ultimately made
Correct.
the decision
Correct.
to the strategy and the design?
Correct. But I suspect it was the finance people who were pushing, because it was more valuable to sell the asset if it had more traffic on it.
Can you recall who was on the board of the Sydney Motorway Corporation at the time?
Look, it's a public document. It's a public document that there were... Tony Shepherd was the chair. There were people from the private sector, and there were 3 representatives from government. And the representatives from government... There's a press release that Duncan Gay, the minister, put out when the board was formed. And so the representatives from government were Peter Regan from Treasury, who was subsequently appointed as Executive Director of Finance for Transport New South Wales, Peter Duncan, who was Head of Roads and Maritime Services at the time, and David Stewart, who was Head of Transport for New South Wales, I recall, after Les retired. David Stewart came from Queensland, was there for, I can't recall exactly how long, but possibly about 2 years, and then moved on back to Queensland. So there were 3 government representatives on that board.
You do realise we're just touching at the edges of what created this problem, don't you? What created this problem was you had one of the biggest projects government was ever going to produce. It should have appointed a project manager day one, let that person take the project all the way through. And that's the way we do it these days. An elite project manager, very best you've got, and they take it all the way through. That didn't happen because it's such a big project, it jumped government streams and goodness knows what else. And they put their own people in there, so they're entitled to do it. But they shouldn't be able to do it for these major projects because it creates these sort of problems we're talking about today.
Mr. Wallinger, you were earlier saying that you lost a certain degree of visibility over the entirety of the project, and you mentioned that in part that was to exclude you giving advice to your minister at the time. Is that correct?
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
You were earlier, in some of your evidence earlier, saying that you'd lost a degree of visibility over the project, and in some part that was due to skullduggery and people not wanting you to give advice to your minister. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you elucidate on that?
Yeah. Well, look, at that stage I'd built about 500 kilometres of bloody motorway around the state, and I was moving on to rail. I was really looking forward to it, and they should have let me put the right project manager in there to deliver it, and then they could come and influence it any way they like, because if I had the right project manager in there, that person would have carried it across the different governments, a whole lot of it. It would have worked.
Given your collective public sector experience, is it your view that all the concerns, all the modelling information, the advice of members of the expert review group, the opinion of Evans and Peck with respect to the final stage 3 design, and effectively being opposed to it, would all of that information have been relayed in some way, shape or form to the minister at the time in charge of delivering the WestConnex project?
I don't know, because I don't know who was managing it at the time. You'd have to go back to all those
Is it
individuals.
plausible that the minister would not have known?
Yeah.
Can I just say that I can't answer that question, and I don't think any of us can answer that question. We never spoke to the minister on this project. And I think another point that's perhaps worth considering here is that the different government agencies overall had slightly different objectives. I think this is an important point. Clearly RMS is responsible, Roads and Maritime Services, are responsible for managing the whole of the network. Transport for New South Wales have got to manage a multimodal strategy. Urban growth, we're looking at the Bays precinct and looking at what was going to happen there in terms of the development. And Treasury was certainly concerned with the finances and what it was going to cost and how much revenue they were going to get back. So there were competing objectives amongst the government agencies, there's no doubt about that. The question then is who had the final say? And that's a question that we were not involved with and we really can't answer.
I did the exercise in plotting that up in a few days. I cannot find any similar plots for any public transport, and it should have been done at the same time by a central agency. It was never done.
I'm just curious about...
Maybe bring the microphone closer.
sorry,
We
I'm
just
just
need
curious
to
about
speak
the,
up, everybody.
So your proposition in terms of the M4 East was that it would end at Haberfield, is that right? And that so there would be no on-ramp that would lead to the Anzac Bridge?
No. Look, I suggest you look at the Auditor General's report, because she has a number of very clear diagrams that illustrates the variations to the design of this project over time. So there's a diagram there of what we originally came up with, another diagram that we worked on, probably 2014 from memory, and then there's the 2016 variation changes to the diagram. The idea was really, in fact, when we first wrote the paper for Infrastructure New South Wales, we referred to it as the inner west bypass. Because the idea was, as I said earlier, was to try and get trucks off Marrickville and off the inner west to the port and the airport. So the mainline tunnel was quite south of the Anzac Bridge, Piermont, the area, the Goodyard area. It's quite south of that. The diagrams show that. It had the ramps at Campbelltown on there for 2012, 2014, and I think they got dropped off in 2016. 2016 they got dropped off. Now, we were never explained to us why they dropped off. And as I say, the Auditor General makes reference to that in her report.
And so it's your contention that those ramps would have alleviated the traffic that runs off the Anzac Bridge and basically goes back through the lead?
Just think about it. If you want to go to Sydney University or if you want to go to Royal Prince Alfred Hospital and you're coming along WestConnex, you are forced to go across the Anzac Bridge. You then exit, so you go through the southern part of the city. You know, the RTA was very, very clear on this point. You should not be putting more traffic into the CBD. This puts more traffic into the CBD. It's not what we want. You know, we've got light rail in the CBD now. We've got to give priority to the light rail that's going north-south. It's crossing over that traffic. So traffic coming into the CBD that impacts on the light rail then will queue back and we get another issue. So you know, it is the wrong design.
So it's your contention that decision was directed to boosting numbers that are running through the tollway?
That is my personal view.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to a comment that was made that within Transport for New South Wales, somewhere within Transport for New South Wales, the decision, the redesign for Rozelle Interchange in 2015-16, I think, was made. And I think, Mr McCreary, you may have indicated to Mr Forward it was Sydney Motorway Corporation, where did it come from your perspective? How was the decision made? Who made the decision?
So which decision?
This is the decision to change the Rozelle Interchange decision. The decision to change the design against all advice, against all modelling, against all of the world's best experts on motorways and traffic modelling, according to you all. Somebody or a unit or people somewhere made the decision to go ahead with Rozelle Interchange. You're arguing today to increase traffic.
So my memory of it is that the three stages of WestConnex were developed with different groups. Stage 1 was first, Stage 2 was second, and Stage 3 then started with a project director, and he gradually built a team. We were part of the expert review group looking at the modelling and doing the different options and trying to work out what seemed to be a good idea. In that process, we wrote these two strategic review reports, one in 2015 without the Western Harbour Tunnel and access to the CBD, and one with. As a consequence of the second report, we said, we think these are the two options which should be reviewed carefully with a business case. That was the end of our involvement. So by that time, the team had built up, but it hadn't come to its final conclusions. We understand, again from the Auditor General's report, is that a decision was made after a substantial review in 2016, and the camperdown ramps were deleted, and the final design was an evolution of that.
And is it your view, because the Auditor General's report, which I've got the summary in front of me, and you mentioned it as well, that the Transport for New South Wales did not publish the rationale for the design changes, including how the changes address the limitations of the previous design while providing increased community benefit through the creation of open space. Is it your view that these, the directions or the directive, if you like, was anybody talking at the time within your kind of transport community? I'm sure there was a lot of discussion about this, about whether the directive was coming from within government, within the SMC, within a particular unit within Transport for New South Wales. What's your view in terms of that design?
Can I just say we were not close enough to the decision makers to say what was happening. There was a lot of discussion by the people from the consultants that Transport for New South Wales were employing at the time to try and push the mainline tunnel further north so that it actually went underneath the Rozelle goods yards or within the Rozelle goods yards. But in terms of making the decision, we cannot answer that question.
Okay, so you're here today because you do believe that it's been a bit of a disaster, and you're warning today that the Western Harbour Tunnel and what's happening with the Warringah Freeway will be another disaster for the people around North Sydney.
Well, certainly if the intersection stays the way it is, it's going to be a bloody disaster. And, you know, when you're looking at this sort of transmitter planning I'm talking about, if you look between Penrith and Parramatta, for example, we've got the main Western Rail line, we've got the M5 West, M4, which is a motorway, the M4 West, which is an urban arterial road, or the Great Western Highway, and 2 strategic bus corridors running about a kilometre either side of it. You know, that's the planning that's got to be done before you get into all this detail about bloody road projects and all this sort of stuff, because those other modes are going to have an influence on the number of lanes you need, the whole lot of it, because that's the only time government can really get involved in projects, because they can then look at what percentage of those total movements in that corridor is going to be rail, what's going to be
Buses.
roads, and the whole works.
Yes.
That's the only thing, that's the time you've got to consult the community, otherwise you're stuck with...
So Mr. Wallinga has just said that the Western Harbour Tunnel kind of going through, opening out onto those changes there at the Warringah Freeway will be a bloody disaster if changes aren't made. Mr. Ford, do you agree with that assessment?
I'm not sure I use the exact words, but I do have some concerns. Having looked at what they're doing there, I have a lot of concerns about the design. I mean, it wasn't the preferred alignment when I was at the RTA, and subsequent work that was done after I left the RTA. They wanted a more western link crossing the harbour that went up through the Gladesville Bridge onto the M2, not putting more traffic onto the Warringah Freeway. The other issue that needs to be thought about here is, of course, the motorway is now being tunnelled underneath the harbour, which has some benefits, but it's at one of the lowest points in the harbour. So the gradient from that low point up to North Sydney is going to be very steep. And that raises the whole question about emissions in the tunnel. So you've now got 3 motorways coming out into this short area, and whilst I would recognise there are some exit points, some off-ramps, those motorways are now all going into the Lane Cove Tunnel. So you've now got, I'm not sure the count of the number of lanes, but there a large number of lanes are going into 2 lanes of the Lane Cove Tunnel. Sounds familiar?
Are there measures that can be taken? We had the Mayor of North Sydney Council give evidence to this inquiry at our last hearing, and wanted it to stop, basically, to see if the government could pull construction. Is that possible? Do you advocate that? And if not, what measures could be put in place to make sure that we don't see Rozelle Interchange 2.0 in North Sydney?
Chair, can I say I've been involved in probably 5 or 6 motorways in Sydney. I was the project director for the Eastern Distributor. The communications on the Western Harbour Tunnel is very poor. It is very difficult as a layperson, as a citizen, to find out what they're actually doing there. All I see around North Sydney is slogans. Have a look at it. Have a look at what they're doing there. It's a very poor way of developing a major motorway for Sydney.
Mr. McCreary, can I I just wanted to see, or Mr. Ford, do either of you have any views as well? This committee unfortunately probably can't make Rozelle Interchange go away, although possibly I'd like to make that recommendation. I'm not sure it'd get support with all my committee colleagues. But Western Harbour Tunnel, the Warringah Freeway exits, the output from that tunnel, if it is constructed and it's open, that hasn't happened yet. Do either of you have views on this and how much of an impact it's going to have on that community and what could be done to prevent it occurring? Mr. Ford?
Unfortunately, I haven't got, pardon me, as Paul indicated, there's been a lack of information coming forward on the detail of how it would interface with the existing road network. I do share some concerns, but in the absence of that detail, I'm not in a position to make a comment on that.
It sounds a bit potentially what Rozelle Interchange in terms of lack of detail and the potential impact as well.
Yes.
Although you are
Exactly.
arguing today there was a lot of detail. I'll go to you a second, Mr. McCreary. Mr. Willinger, were you about to say something?
Yes, I was. You know, I thought you'd ask me the question, why did I think it was going to be a disaster? And, you know, there's a simple answer to that. When the school holiday's on and traffic drops just 2 or 3%, the whole thing flows. But, you know, when this new Western Harbour Tunnel, it's got all these little ramps feeding themselves into the intersection itself, and there's at least 4 lots of 2 or 3% feeding into that. So it's going to blow the whole bloody thing up. You reckon you got problems now. You wait, if you don't change this bloody intersection soon, you're going to have a lot more to deal with, I can assure you.
Just expand on that. If we don't change this intersection soon, so if you're saying if we don't change the way in which Rozelle Interchange is operating, is that what you mean, or Warringah?
No, the Rozelle Interchange should have just one main ramp heading south. You should hook the Iron Cove Bridge up with the Anzac Bridge. Let the traffic flow through, for goodness sake. It's the largest arterial road in Sydney at the moment. You can't have a motorway flow into that intersection, the largest bloody arterial road flow into that intersection, and expect that bridge to handle it. Your constraints on the Anzac Bridge, period.
Thank you. Ms Ward?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Gentlemen, we were speaking last about the your submission that referred to the world's best traffic designers didn't come up with the Rozelle Interchange concept. I just wanted to go back to that. So, Mr. McCreary, can we get to the point of, I think we established that it was Transport for New South Wales with potentially some other experts, but it was owned in a sense or managed by Transport for New South Wales. That's correct, isn't it?
As I understand it, in 2016 there was a redesign done
Yep.
by SMC, which was working for Transport for New South Wales
Okay,
at that
thank
stage.
you. Yep. And for that kind of, is it correct to say that for that scale of infrastructure project that you would need specialised skills for that style of project?
Absolutely.
Okay. If the implied criticism is that the concept is not correct, that is, that the transport design of it was not correct or has been not prepared properly or not with adequate thought for the change, that would mean, I guess, that there's some Transport for New South Wales designers or the people that were designing at that point, somebody in there, weren't the world's best traffic designers in a sense. Is that what we're to take?
So there would have been consultants working for SMC, briefed to progressively work through this and come up with the optimal solution. But as Paul has said, government agencies come from different viewpoints, and there would have been 4 competing viewpoints: Treasury, Urban Growth, Transport, Roads, trying to come up with the appropriate solution. In 2016, this West Connects was into construction.
Mm-hmm.
It has the longest urban road tunnels in the world. It is a very complex piece of work. Sooner or later they'd have to make a decision, and they made that decision in mid-2016. For what reasons, we don't know. It wasn't visible to us.
Okay, so do you think that perhaps Transport for New South Wales needed to improve their road design team, given what we're seeing, based on your view that you've given today of the Rozelle Interchange?
They probably had a very expert bunch of consultants working on this. But again, the decision sitting behind this 2016 change was invisible to us, but it would have been a balance between the needs and wants of those government agencies.
Yeah, but I guess we're getting to the tin tacks of the design, which seems to be the issue. I'm just interested in that design. I get the decision, I get the involvement of the parties. I've heard what you said about the input, and obviously there would be a fair bit of input to that, but I guess what I understand is that your view, might I understand that what you've said is world-best planning and roads planning perhaps was not implemented here. Is that correct?
Look, I wouldn't want to say that. We are not in a position to say that.
Okay.
I know that within transport there were some excellent traffic models.
Good, thank you.
Still are in transport.
Okay. So can I just go on to the design? So WestConnect was obviously designed to be a motorway connection to connect the western suburbs of Sydney. Do you think that it's meeting that objective, Mr McCreary?
From a personal experience, if I come from the southwest and I go underground and I come up 15 kilometres later, I'm in the heart of the inner west. For me, it's a fantastic experience, yes.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Look, I think we do need to allocate credit to the people who have built this motorway. There are mistakes, but it is an amazing piece of infrastructure that will actually change the way Sydney operates as a city. There are significant benefits, but there are also some problems with it.
Mr Ford? Mr Willinger?
I'll put my traffic engineer's hat on. There's no simple solution to what we're experiencing at the Rozelle interchange. At the very best, we can run around with some band-aids and address some minor issues or some local issues. But from a traffic point of view, there are no simple solutions.
But my question actually is about, all right, so let's move on. So Transport for New South Wales have publicly stated that their goal is to wait and enable the traffic pattern shifts to emerge rather than to take any action. That's what they've said publicly. Do you think that's the sensible approach?
Well, you can't expect the public service to provide government with the advice when you allow structures that were in place to exist. Because the reality is, Transport for New South Wales are just building it. They've had a design passed on to them, and that design was probably created in good faith. And the people at the time thought they had the appropriate advice and everything, but as it turns out, they just bloody didn't.
That's with respect, Mr Willinger, that wasn't my question. I understand what you're saying, but my question is about the current stated goal of Transport for New South Wales, which is to enable the traffic pattern shifts to happen, to let those emerge rather than to take action right now. Should they wait for the traffic shift to emerge, or should they be taking action now? What do you think
Perhaps
is the sensible approach, Mr McCreary?
If I could respond to that.
Yeah, I'll just start with Mr
Sure.
McCreary and I'll
Yep,
go
absolutely.
along. Yep.
So I didn't ever work in government. I've advised government.
Yes,
if I'm looking at the concrete that's there now and the difficulties in changing that with construction contracts, it's not something you'd want to be doing first. You'd want to be letting the transport patterns try and evolve themselves and solve the solution. That may not work, but that is certainly what I'll be doing for the next little while.
When you say a little while, how long?
Yeah, good
how long do you
question.
wait for traffic patterns to emerge while people
Well,
are stuck
like-
in traffic, can't get out of their driveways in Drummoyne, can't
Yeah.
back their cars out, can't get their kids to
So
school?
even now,
how long do you wait?
Even now, people are working out if they're approaching a point of change of lanes. You're working out now what to do better, and you're going to be in a better position. I find myself doing the same thing, so the public will be doing that as well.
So how long, in your opinion?
It would be a guess.
6 months? 12 months?
I reckon you got a
year?
month
Sorry,
or two.
I'll come to you, Mr. Willinger. I just want to work along. I've got 3 minutes. Yep.
I would allow 6 to 12 months, but in the
Six
same
after
time,
this, so continuing
now,
on
from
from
now.
now. So another
I'd
year.
still be looking at it from an engineering point of view and trying to work out if it doesn't solve itself, then what could we do? And the answer to that question might be there's nothing you can do now.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Forward, how long would you wait?
We have attached to our summary 16
Yeah,
recommendations.
so helpful. Thank you.
And they're prepared on the premise that people in the inner west of Sydney have suffered a financial cost. Accessibility to their suburbs, within and to their suburbs, has been reduced.
Yep.
They need to be compensated. The way we are arguing them to be compensated is through improved public transport through the inner west. There are lots of suggestions there.
Thank you.
Some of those suggestions can be made almost immediately.
Thank you. Okay. About the traffic patterns, Mr. Willinger, I think you wanted to add something to that. Do we wait and let those, as Transport have recommended, they've said we'll wait for the traffic patterns to emerge, or do you think something should be done now?
something should be done now, in my view, but I've been building things all my life.
What do you think
I'd
should
be
be
out there
done
with a
now?
bulldozer tomorrow knocking over some of that stuff and getting rid of the bloody toll off. You know, you can't have part of the connection to the bridge from Anzac Parade tolled, not tolled, another bit tolled.
So you're suggesting remove the toll and that would fix the congestion problems?
No, I don't know. Until I get and have a detailed look at it, if I get a chance to have a detailed look at it, I don't know. But I do know the final outcome is straight through from Victoria Road to Anzac Bridge. Now, I think I'm the only one that's had a look at this so far, and I've spent
right.
a few days on it.
Given, do you want to perhaps take that on notice? I've got 2 minutes, so I might move on to Mr Ford, but you might want to give us an answer on notice if you'd like time to consider it. Do we wait for traffic to settle, or are there things that could be done right now? Mr Ford?
I don't think the community can wait that long because they're that bloody frustrated out there. I'm surprised they're not in here with
Yeah.
guns.
All right.
That's how
Mr. Ford?
serious I think it is.
Thank you. I believe there are a number of things that can be done in the short run, but as I mentioned earlier, they are band-aids. They will not fix the overall issue, which is severe congestion on the Anzac Bridge. But so, for example, some of the merging sections are inadequate. The lengths are inadequate. 3 into 1 over a very short distance doesn't conform to any current road design standard, and there are a few of those around. We've indicated in our recommendations that a clear review of the merging arrangements needs to be undertaken, and I think it's a matter of urgency.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your
Now,
view is...
I'm a resident of the Inner West. I use Victoria Road every day, and I came that way this morning. My wife was driving, and we both needed a cup of coffee by the time we got here.
Sure. I'm sorry, I've got 40 seconds, so you might get to the end of the... Did you get the coffee?
Yes.
Don't waste time.
Okay. All right then. So can I just get to one of your recommendations? It calls for, in your submission, a tidal flow system on Anzac Bridge.
Yes.
And the bridge has 8 lanes. How would you foresee the breakdown of the lane configuration in the AM and PM peak?
Oh, that's, well, in the morning peak, an extra inbound lane, but I must admit, must stress
Can you
here...
change that over and make that inbound?
Yes, but that lane needs to be focused immediately to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Now, let me explain. Years ago, we had a problem with Bathurst Street ramp queuing back up past the Goldborough Mort building. And once the queue got past the Goldborough Mort building, it would block off access to the city and to the Anzac and to the Harbour Bridge. And immediately the queue would go straight back across Anzac Bridge. At that time, the coordination through the city in Bathurst Street was east-west and very heavily focused in that direction. With the light rail, it's now north-south. So the probability of a queue coming back up the Bathurst Street ramp is now a lot higher than what it was before. The only way we can actually free access to the Sydney Harbour Bridge and stop that tailback onto the Anzac Bridge is to dedicate a separate lane for Sydney Harbour Bridge traffic and to keep the city traffic out of that lane.
So keep that, for example, as the far left inbound straight onto the harbour.
Correct,
Bridge.
yes.
Okay.
And that,
Okay.
so that lane would need to be marked back to the fish market's offload.
Thank you. Might take on
Thank
notice
you.
the PM.
We've got a questions from remaining
Can I just
time
jump
to
in on that
government.
question because so how would that work with what Transport describe as the weave, where you're trying to get off to the it's the King Street exit.
Yes.
So you cross. You have to. The traffic's flowing on the Anzac Bridge. Some are going onto the harbour ramp, the harbour bridge ramp, and the others are weaving back across to try and. So if you had a dedicated lane, that would
Similar to
obstruct
No,
that.
but in doing so, you'd need to generate an additional lane.
But you'd still have the weave problem, wouldn't you?
Not on the bridge. Not on the bridge, on the city side of the bridge.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, speak into the microphone if you are wanting it on Hansard, please.
There will be a weaving movement, that's correct. And I think you're talking about the onload from the fish markets and that weave. Or are we talking about a weaving movement from
Past the Goldborough Mort building, as you go past the Goldborough Mort building, there's the the lane that takes you onto the Harbour Bridge, and then it's merging with traffic that's coming up from Harris Street, and the traffic are weaving across. Some are going across to the Harbour Bridge, some are going back onto the ramp that
Now,
takes
my
you up
point
King
is
Street.
that you'd separate the Sydney Harbour Bridge traffic well back on the Western Distributor. And so other traffic would have, in an additional lane, for example. And so that weaving movement would only be between the Bathurst Street, the King Street traffic, and traffic into the Sydney Harbour cross-city tunnel. So that's one element of the weaving movement was being removed.
Right.
In relation to other major transport projects you've been directly involved with, what is the chain of command with respect to approval processes for business cases and final designs?
Budget Committee of Cabinet and the delegated authority of the project.
But I mean, presumably there's a chain of command before you...
let's just get Mr. Willinger, if you're going to, you have to move much closer to the microphone, please, if you could just repeat that.
There's only two decision-making areas that matter: Budget Committee of Cabinet or the Infrastructure Committee of Cabinet, and the project manager's authority under his contract.
Okay.
That's the way it should be.
Okay. You've made a number of helpful suggestions with respect to resolving congestion in Rozelle. Were those suggestions ever provided at an earlier design stage to the previous government?
Well, from Anzac Bridge up until a new interchange that brings the southern stuff in, you would need 2 lanes plus 2 bus lanes. I'd then change that through that intersection to 3 lanes plus 2 bus lanes all the way into the city.
But to answer your question, no.
I was going to say that, no.
Okay. Mark.
I'm a little bit perplexed.
Mark, microphone.
Sorry, I'm a little bit perplexed.
Guys, what is it?
Well, first of all, I mean, essentially your evidence seems to be that this government's inherited a structural design flaw which, whilst at the margins might be ameliorated, is basically we've got the proverbial sandwich and we've got to live with it as a result of that structural design flaw. Is that the case?
What we are saying in our recommendations is that we need to get people out of cars in the inner west. If you can do that at the margin, you'll have a significant improvement. You won't solve it, but you'll have an improvement. So the people of the inner west need to be compensated through better public transport. There are many options to do that, and we mention those in our recommendations.
Yes.
Look, we can't change the past.
No.
If I was looking at this project today, I'd build the Western Sydney Metro first, get that done, see what traffic it takes.
Yeah. So given that structural inheritance that this government's now got to deal with, and you're saying that public transport is a way forward.
No, you've got to decide what percentages you're going to put on roads, what percentages you're going to put on trams, what percentage you're going to put on rail. And you need to do the multi-mode study. Identify those roads like I spoke about between Penrith and Parramatta now. You've got to do that straight away. Somebody's got to sit down, produce a dozen or so maps like this with all the transport modes on it, so you can see the interactions. If you can't see the interactions, you cannot build with confidence.
So just going back to the process, I'm just struggling to understand how a secretary of a department and CEOs of major bodies having inputs into the initial designs, which would have solved, which would have...
They write the cabinet minutes that go up to Budget Committee Cabinet.
They get, yeah, okay. So how is it conceivable that a government who's going to finally push the button on turning the sods and getting the construction going isn't privy to this previous information?
Well, that's why I said I don't think they've done the right thing by you. They should have given you more information. They should have taken out and shown you what the problems are, those sorts of things.
But if you're a minister in charge of this project, wouldn't it be fairly procedurally normal that all the previous input data, no matter how many variations there were, gets presented on its merits, and then the minister, you should be aware of X, Y, Z from previous studies as to the effects.
Can I answer that question? I think that the model is flawed. As I said earlier in our presentation, you've set up a separate entity to deliver a motorway. A separate entity that's actually chaired by the private sector, has private sector representatives on it, and has people from government on it. The minister is quite distant from that process. It was different to every other motorway built, every other toll road built in Sydney. There's lessons there to be learnt.
But it was a state-owned corporation.
Pardon?
But it was a state-owned corporation.
Yeah. The frustration in all of this, of course, is the time you find out a project's going bad, it's too late to do anything about it. And something's got to be done about that.
I suppose I just find it inconceivable that elected officials would have been unaware of the advice prepared by engineers, road designers, expert reference groups, the RMS at the time. It just seems inconceivable to me that elected officials would not have been aware of any of those concerns or anxieties.
Well, we can't answer that question. Clearly, we were not in a position to observe what was happening at that decision-making level.
But Mr. Ford, your evidence previous to my colleague's question is that part of that problem is this idea of government that you give it to an arm's length body and you just accept, once they come back to you, the minister just accepts what they've given because they're the experts. I'm not going to look too far into it.
It's related to the fierceness of competition you get for resources in the budget committee. They just want to put
Say again, mate, sorry?
It's the fierceness of competition between departments for resources from the budget committee, because they work out what they need to get the next decision. They put enough in a cabinet meeting to do that at usually the direction of the minister's office to get what they want at that stage. They don't never take. They never look back.
Would it be fair to say that a key driving factor in this would have been Treasury's desire to maximise the uplift of the sale and what that would do to the bottom line? Therefore, they would have had, at the time, the overarching influence over the final decision?
I'm not sure about the last statement, that they had the overarching, but your first statement, in my opinion, is correct.
So having absorbed all the risk, there would have been a motivation to make sure that as many toll trips were pushed through as possible to maximise the sale price.
The state's got a whole history of projects that it's delivered in the past. Surely someone can go back and say, look, your modelling's saying that you've got 22 or 2,300 bloody vehicles per hour going through that lane. How's that going to work?
Mr. Forward, you were about to answer as well.
Look, all I would say is there are ministers and there are ministers. Some ministers, from my experience, are all over these projects. They take a very personal interest in what's happening. They have regular meetings with the teams. They look at the evidence and decisions are made. Other ministers are very much at arm's length. So and I wasn't privy to the ministers of the day when these decisions were made.
There's a real...
Chair, we're out of time.
I'll just allow one more question.
I mean, there is something that we all need to learn here in terms of project delivery. Is it your view that many of the flaws structurally with the project can be traced back to the delivery model that was established in the very first instance with WestConnex?
Well, I'll answer it and then Stuart can have a go. My response to that is yes. Remember, the model that we've got with WestConnex is very similar to the CityLink model in Melbourne. Melbourne, Victoria, has now changed back to a more government control model. It's a different approach. They've now gone back to what we were doing with the Eastern Distributor, Western Sydney Orbital, etc. So I think Victoria has noted the flaws as well. It might be an area worth exploring. But it would seem to me the premise of your question is correct.
Final words, Mr
Yes,
McCreary.
you asked at the very beginning, why are we here? Why are we prepared to come and give evidence? And for me, that is about, I've always thought, as this thing has evolved, that there's a book in this somewhere that steps through how this thing has changed and how through the evolutionary stages of 12, 14 years that it's taken, what's happened to the role of authority? Who's had authority and influence at a particular time to be able to make a decision? And it's not clear to me. And I think if anything is to be learnt out of this, it's to make sure that those processes work going forward.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent statement to finish on. We're over time. Thank you very much for contacting the committee and for offering to give evidence today. It's been extremely useful. The committee will be in touch if we have any further questions for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The committee will be break now until 10:30. We'll come back if that's okay. Yep. good. And we'll go. Great. All right, welcome back. We'll get straight on to our next session by swearing in the witnesses, starting with my left. And of course, Minister, you don't need to be sworn in. So we'll start with you, Mr. Issa.
Thank you. I swear the evidence that I'm now about to give be given by Stephen Issa shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much. Mr. Notze, is it?
Knutzer, thank you.
Knotze, sorry.
I swear that the evidence I'm now about to give by me will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Could you please state your name and position title too?
Grant Knutzer, Executive Director of Customer Journey Planning and Transport for New South Wales.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Good morning, Josh Murray, Secretary of Transport. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Drover.
Good morning. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins.
Good morning. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you so much. Now, do Mr. Murray or Minister have a short opening statement?
I believe Mr. Murray does. I'll just say a couple of things. Firstly, it's a delight to be back with the Parliamentary Committee. Firstly, the government has supported this committee. I think the work's really important. From a government point of view, we are looking for solutions. We understand this has had an impact on the community, and the fact the committee is prepared to help in that search for solutions is really welcome. What we'll try and do today is go into some of the specifics too about what we know about how the Rozelle Interchange is performing. So I think it helps to be as specific as we can be, but I'm happy to deal with that in the evidence.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Chair and honourable members, and thank you for the opportunity for Transport for New South Wales to join the Minister in front of this inquiry. Delivery of major transport infrastructure in an urban centre of a major city is never easy, but often least of all for those living in the immediate vicinity of the projects. Providing these major projects while ensuring genuine empathy and engagement to local communities is a responsibility that Transport for New South Wales takes extremely seriously and dedicates itself to mitigating wherever possible. Transport wishes to acknowledge the disruption that Inner West residents have experienced over many years while bearing the brunt of delivery of what is arguably the most complex underground motorway junction ever constructed. Delivery of this final intricate stage of WestConnex and the Rozelle Interchange has been noisy, dirty and disruptive for an extended period. As witnesses have been clear to this committee, it has also delivered significant traffic and productivity benefits across the city and further afield, but these have been felt least in the very areas where that construction impact was centred. We acknowledge that these experiences, congestion, constant change, delayed openings of the parkland and now rat running through parts of the Inner West, concentrated on those peak 2 hours on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursday mornings, has tested the local community's patience and their confidence in the project. We are continuing to work with residents, councils and stakeholders to examine additional models and options on a week-by-week basis. We are now at the 6-month mark, which we advised repeatedly at the time would be necessary to monitor traffic and its impacts. We are assessing what has worked and what remains to be done to provide more assistance to the Drummoyne Peninsula in particular, just as we did with the City West Link initial delays and the flow-on choke points at Robert and Darling Streets exits at Rozelle. Resolving those shows the average trip through the Inner West is now generally taking the same amount of time to journeys prior to the opening, and in some cases less. Daily traffic volumes on Victoria Road at Rozelle are down by half, from 62,500 vehicles a day at Wellington Street in March 2023 to 30,500 vehicles a day in March this year. Further afield, as the committee heard from Transurban, commutes from Penrith to the city have shaved 30 minutes per trip, and from Liverpool 20 minutes. That's up to 5 hours more at home a week for some Western Sydney families who may have few choices but to drive. The afternoon peak is getting motorists home more reliably on a daily average as 4 westbound Anzac Bridge lanes connect to those multiple express options. But again, we accept it is the East Drummoyne community that is still experiencing the worst congestion in those key morning peaks and rat running on local roads. The concerns of those residents are our current focus. We also are delivering major capital projects and public transport service upgrades that will add even more options to the inner west commute. Chair, our transport team here today joining the Minister includes our Deputy Secretary, Infrastructure and Place, Ms Drover, who can assist with questions about the scope of the project and its technical delivery. Our Coordinator General, Mr Collins, who can speak to our operational preparations and communications. Our Executive Director, Community and Place, Mr Issa, who can address questions about the Inner West engagement and overall network integration for that area. And our Executive Director, Customer Journey Management, Mr Knutzer, who can assist with operational insights in the work of the Transport Management Centre following your visit there earlier in the inquiry. We welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go to questions from the opposition first. Ms Natalie Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming along. The Minister, thank you for attending today and coming along to assist the inquiry. It's good to see a Minister here and we appreciate you and all your team's assistance. Can I ask about following the opening of the Rozelle interchange to anyone that you consider appropriate to answer? So following the opening of the interchange, Transport for New South Wales made emergency changes to adjust that traffic flow northbound on the City West Link. What consideration was given to the Drummoyne area of the impacts of introducing those changes?
Yeah, I'll hand to the Secretary and the team in a minute, but there were a number of changes, as you've identified. I'll quickly characterise them. 11 days in after the opening, there were changes made, physical changes to the road network around that City West Link. That was followed by light phasing changes some time later that really did assist on the Balmain-Rozelle Peninsula in particular. And then thirdly, changes to make as much of this data public as possible. 3 key interventions which have improved things, as you've heard, but we're obviously conscious of the impact it's had. But I might ask the team to answer more generally.
Thank you. And you'll be aware I've got limited time, so forgive me jumping in, but I'm specifically relating to the impacts affecting Drummoyne.
Yes, thank you, Ms Ward. And absolutely, as we said in those initial days, as we examined some of those infrastructure improvements, our biggest concern in making those was that we would move congestion to other areas. Attaching ourselves to that inner west and the initial City West Link concern was our first priority because that was building back on those initial days. We were conscious of Drummoyne, but we had to see how those models would play out as different changes were put in place. So the City West Link was the first one to look at, and then that created the additional pressure at Robert Street in particular, and that prevented the buses from coming back onto Victoria Road. So it was an evolving process as we worked through different pinch points. Each element that we tested, including the traffic light phasing the Minister's just mentioned, had a different impact. And in fact, it was some of those early traffic light changes that caused even greater concerns for Drummoyne. So finding that balance over those days was the task.
All right, and so as part of that, you mentioned the traffic signalling. I'm happy for anyone to ask. There's no trick questions here. We have different options and different solutions and impacts. I'm interested in the consideration of those. So it's evident that the traffic signalling on Victoria Road, Drummoyne and Balmain-Rozelle was changed to ease those impacts on the Balmain-Rozelle section. But how were those considered specifically to affect Drummoyne and in those changes you mentioned?
I might ask Mr Knutzer to speak to that in terms of the work that the Transport Management Centre did.
So on those first few days and those first 11 days, we were obviously looking at balancing all the entries and exits within the Rozelle interchange. And we were, as the Secretary's just mentioned, our focus was balancing City West Link and also Victoria Road. So we were looking at those as corridors in their entirety in terms of how the travel time was impacted through those corridors. In getting that balance right, which is what we end up doing after those first 11 days, largely when we sort of understood a little bit more about how the patterns were moving. Part of our opportunity to actually manage the traffic through those corridors would have been right through from Rozelle up into Drummoyne, which is where we know, we were having sort of the issue raised with about local traffic impacts.
Yes, so what specific consideration was given to Drummoyne impacts?
We gave consideration to the whole of Victoria Road corridor, so that included all communities along the corridor. But I think, we were also apparently, it was very clear to us from feedback from the community in Rozelle and Drummoyne those first few weeks that there were local traffic impacts as a consequence of that corridor.
Ms Ward, I think you saw the Transport Management Centre and the expertise that's there, especially we had the JOC stood up as a special operation to monitor all of the intersections that were affected at the time. We had a huge amount of information coming in from the public, the media, from parliamentarians, and we were managing that with the expertise that was in there. But certainly all the questions about could we mitigate this through these changes were worked through with what would be the flow-on impacts in that regard.
Right, but I guess I'm specifically asking, it's now the third time I'm to 5 minutes, and not a criticism, but I'm interested in the very specific impacts to Drummoyne and what consideration was given to those, given there does seem to be some evidence that it's moved forward. So I might move on to specifics. Canada Bay Council has advised the Drummoyne Residents Committee that Transport for New South Wales informed them of the need to undertake a local traffic study to mitigate the impact of the opening of the Rozelle Interchange. The estimated cost for such a study is circa $200,000, potentially more. How does Transport for New South Wales expect the council to fund this?
Thank you for the question. Just to be as specific as possible about what's going on in Drummoyne, the advice to me, but the committee should feel free to ask the transport people here today, is those trips in along Victoria Road are now about the same time as they were in March 2023. At the peak, on average, that is now the same time. There is an issue in Drummoyne, though, that's been created as this has opened up. And the view that's been put to the committee, and I've looked at the submissions, but also to the government, is it's very much about the rat running in those streets, particularly people crossing over into other streets.
So getting to that traffic study on those, sorry to interrupt you, Minister, but to get to those specific traffic study, the recommendation has been dealing with this group, go and get your own, to the council, go and get your own traffic study. My question is very specific. How does Transport expect council to be funding that local traffic study? Does it expect the ratepayers to pay for that?
I'll answer from a government point of view, which is I think that will be unreasonable given what we're dealing with. There is an impact here on local traffic. I'm not prepared to wait for the 12-month network assessment to deal with those Drummoyne issues. What I've asked Transport to do is do some immediate work, a report on those Drummoyne rat runs, working with the local council so that
a traffic study, Minister?
So that they don't have to do that work. That should include some of that traffic study work. I expect it to be completed in June, and that work will be done with the council, but it should be done by Transport in order to make sure that we get a grip on this issue, because I understand it is having an impact.
All right, so I'm to understand that perhaps that advice may now be changed somewhat, that Transport for New South Wales is not saying to council, you go and do your own study and pay for it, but that you are directing or somehow saying that we will do that traffic study on those rat runs and those local roads.
Yeah, I've asked, these are local roads, but I've asked Transport to lead on this process, work with the council and examine those local road issues in Drummoyne, in particular in East Drummoyne, and that should make this easier for the council to to deal with, but feel free to you can certainly ask some of the team about what's involved.
Yeah, in terms of cost, so will Transport bear that cost for that traffic
Yes,
study?
my expectation is Transport's the lead. They will be actually conducting that work, working with the council.
And they'll be conducting a traffic study, just to be clear.
I might hand to Mr Issa, who is the lead on this question.
Thank you, Minister. So I personally met with Drummoyne Council in March, and we actually indicated that we would undertake the traffic study and we would do the assessments, not that council would do it. But that given that
council's wrong in their submission, or
so
that's
there
changed?
may be some confusion, but given they are the local road authority, that we would have to work with council to undertake the traffic study.
Mr Issa, excuse me interrupting, I've got 1 minute, but it seems there's a disconnect as at yesterday that they have been told that they must go and get a traffic study.
Well, just to short circuit that, they will not be paying.
Okay.
Transport
thank you.
will lead and pay.
Thank you,
and I
Minister.
think that's
helpful.
important given the
Okay,
impact.
thank you. That's very helpful. Residents who contacted Transport for New South Wales prior to and subsequent to the Rozelle interchange opening were consistently advised in writing that the congestion being experienced along Victoria Road and adjacent streets would resolve itself after the Iron Cove Tunnel opened. Do Transport for New South Wales believe that to be true, and if so, on what basis?
I might just put those times that the Secretary's put again. If you're coming from Penrith or Liverpool, significant savings, 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Those 6 months in, the advice to me, but the committee should feel free to quiz this, is coming down Victoria Road, it's the same time. Coming down the City West Link now, 5 minutes faster than it was in March 23. This is at the peak. So those predictions are now coming true that we made as this opened. Real traffic issues, but then it will improve. But I invite the committee to quiz those details.
All right, so you believe the interchange is working and it's resolved itself?
Well, I believe the interchange is working to the extent it can. There are very real issues with the design and the limitations of this design, and the committee heard some of those this morning, including in concerning evidence about some of the design decisions that were made back in 2015
Sure,
and 2016.
but getting to the very specific question of resolving itself, now that it's in place, I just want to be clear, is it your view and Transport's view that from your evidence has resolved itself, given that the travel times, you say, are now consistent, or is there more work to be done?
No,
on
I think there's more work to be done, and I'm happy to spell out some of the reasons why, some of the expectations about what that work is for the committee.
Yeah, we want to get to solutions here.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree with that.
Minister, you just said that there were some issues with the design, or given the limitations of the design back in 2015. Is there anybody on your team here today that was working within the department back in 2015, firstly?
I believe that may be the case, but I'm happy to put that to the team.
Not in a design capacity. Mr. Issa was in the organisation at the time.
So was I.
And Mr. Knutzer.
So we have Transport for New South Wales here today, but nobody, just to be clear, that was working within Transport for New South Wales, because the submission by the government states that, or it would have been RMS, Roads and Maritime Services, of course, at that time, that Stage 3B was procured and delivered by the then Roads and Maritime Services Agency. Is there anybody here that can speak to what happened in 2015 to get us into this mess? Or?
Ms. Drover will do her best to, as our head of project delivery across the organisation, to look at the decisions that led up to the delivery.
That would be very helpful, Ms. Drover.
Okay, and just noting that I joined government in late 2017, and by that stage, the Rozelle Interchange was being procured by Sydney Motorway Corporation. You may remember there was the procurement was halted when they only received one bidder, and after that stage it was transferred to the RMS for the procurement and the delivery. So I might just go through the timeline as I understand it. So INSW had their state infrastructure strategy was released in 2012.
Can we fast track to 2015? We do know, we know a lot so far. I think the question is actually what happened within Transport for New South Wales. If that has been documented in terms of how the design suddenly shifted to include the Rozelle interchange to get rid of the Camperdown, there was that particular decision that we've heard from the previous witnesses, that they allege that it was all about driving more traffic onto WestConnex to increase the sale price, to bring more money into Treasury and to increase the sale price of WestConnex. We're very keen to know what happened during that period. So 2014-15...
So in 2015 there was an updated strategic business case for WestConnex. At that time there was a decision to duplicate the City West Link and bring that road to Rozelle. There was also the
updated strategic business case. Is there a document? Is there a trail of decisions made? How that strategic business case was ordered? Who ordered it?
My understanding, it was done by Sydney Motorway Corporation. Yes, so that was
So
my-
Sydney Motorway Corporation delivered a updated strategic business case which included Rozelle Interchange?
is my understanding, and there were three primary changes. So one was the duplication of City West Link towards Rozelle, as I said. There was also provision for the future connection of Western Harbour Tunnel and Beaches Link. And at that stage, I understand that the Camperdown connection was still within the design for the Rozelle Interchange. Then we moved to 2016, and there was a significant design review, so that by about August 2017, when the EIS for Stage 3 of WestConnex, and just noting that Stage 3 of WestConnex included the M4 and 5 link and the Rozelle Interchange, so both what we call Part 3A and Part 3B of WestConnex. So by the time the EIS was released in late 2017, the design of the interchange had been undergrounded, because prior to that it was an above-ground interchange of viaducts, etc. The reason for that, as I understand it, was of course to deliver that 10 hectares of parkland. And there was also the introduction of the Iron Cove link, the toll-free connection between the Iron Cove Bridge and Anzac Bridge.
So back early with that strategic business case in 2015, and then does that go to a particular minister to be signed off to go to Cabinet? What was the process internally with that strategic business case that was delivered to the government by Sydney Motorway Corporation? Where did it
I
go?
can talk about processes more generally.
But can I just ask, you're saying you can talk about processes more generally because the processes aren't documented? Because if they're documented, I'm asking very specifically who approved it, who did it go to when it came into the department?
So all I know, the design and the EIS was prepared by Sydney Motorway Corporation.
Upon instruction by anybody?
Well, it was also part of course, the project was always under the INSW assurance process, so it would have been through that assurance process.
So there was no, so there was no instruction by that. If you've had a look at the paper trail, and we really appreciate you doing that for this inquiry, was there instruction by anybody within government, by ministers, to SMC to provide a strategic business case? Or was it just Infrastructure New South Wales, you're saying?
I wasn't there at the time, but it is normal practice before projects go out on display for an EIS, for the design and the EIS to have a government approval before it goes out on display.
Is your evidence here today that Sydney Motorway Corporation came up with that strategic business case without direction from government?
Well, Sydney Motorway Corporation at that stage was 100% owned by the government.
Without direction from a minister?
Well, I can't comment on exactly what occurred there because I wasn't there until late 2017.
No, but you've looked at the paper trail, Ms Drover, and that's what that's your evidence today. You have looked at the paper trail to give evidence here. Was there ministerial direction?
I don't have visibility of what happened within Sydney Motorway Corporation.
What about outside of Sydney Motorway Corporation? What do you have visibility of? And the question is, was there any direction from a minister to produce that strategic business case?
Well, I suspect the government would have been fully across what was being prepared at the time, given the scale and nature of the project and also part of the INSW assurance process.
Have you seen any documentation that is a ministerial direction?
No, I have not.
Have you seen any other documentation that suggests the minister requested that the strategic business case be created?
It's fair to say I haven't gone looking for that evidence. My evidence is my experience, which is from late August 2017.
Yes, but you are here today giving us the paper trail, which again I very much appreciate. Minister, you were about to step in before?
I was just only indicating that I think Ms Drover had confirmed the usual practice would be for the government to be informed I haven't seen these documents, but I can confirm that's the general practice before those steps are taken.
So what we have heard today, and it's been apparent as well with other witnesses, but that everything was pointing to the fact that Anzac Bridge could really take not much more traffic. The Anzac Bridge was at capacity before the Rozelle interchange was approved. Was the department then aware? I know that you weren't around at the time or involved in it, but you're dealing with it now. When did you become aware that there would be such chaos as a result of the opening of the interchange? Because it just wasn't going to work with the 14 lanes kind of flowing into 4. I assume Transport for New South Wales knew this all along?
Yeah, so the EIS was quite clear in 2017 that there would be disruption with the delivery of the Rozelle interchange. And in fact, there was a special condition in the planning approval of 2018, E63, which required Transport, as it is today, to undertake a network plan, because the EIS, of course, was done in 2016-17. The project was delivered at the end of 23. So prior to the opening of the project, there was a network plan that was undertaken to redo the modelling and assess what were the actual conditions across the network at the time, and to assess what interventions were required prior to the opening of the Rozelle interchange. And that was undertaken. There are a number of mitigations, interventions that occurred prior to the opening of the Rozelle interchange. A couple of them are still in train, and there are further ones that we are pursuing.
Thank you.
And in fact, if we look at the results of that network plan, many of the levels of service across the network were predicted in the EIS to be worse than what we are actually experiencing today, given the interventions that have occurred just prior to the opening and that continue.
Thank you. We've got questions from government members. Mr Danver.
Thank you, Chair. Just quoting from the Transport for New South Wales submission to the committee, and I quote, "Following the release of the 2013 design, the New South Wales Government made 3 decisions which generated several necessary design changes captured in the 2015 design change." Can you provide the committee with some clarity on who the reference to the New South Wales Government is? Is it the WestConnex Delivery Authority, the Sydney Motorway Corporation, the Minister, Cabinet? Or perhaps take it on notice?
I might take that on notice.
Okay, because the committee has heard some evidence that in 2014 there was a significant change in the motorways philosophy or strategy, and then in 2015 a fundamental design change to stage 3 of the project. And the concerning thing is that it seemingly has gone against significant amounts of planning, advice and concerns. So any information that could be provided to the committee with respect to the rationale of those changes would be welcome.
Yeah, and I accept government's a broad term. We'll bring back what information we can. I will note that in 2014, the Infrastructure New South Wales State Infrastructure Strategy update, so the update from 2012, that did advocate for some north and south connections to WestConnex, and it was then that the provision for the Western Harbour Tunnel came into play.
Chair, just to assist the committee, just 2 comments about the principles that apply here. The first is, look, as an incoming minister, I don't have access to these documents. I've got the expert advice of Transport, which is extremely helpful, on the principle that incoming governments shouldn't have access to a former government's documents. That's appropriate. I think that's a really important principle in government. Secondly, though, I do want to indicate it'd be, I think it's reasonable for Ms Drover to take these questions on notice, given she wasn't there, but my expectation is the parliamentary committee's got to do its job as well, and it is reasonable for the committee to ask Transport what was the decision, where were the decisions made, and expect answers to that. So I think it's appropriate to take it on notice, but it's also appropriate that that information be provided to the committee where it is known.
The submission also states that, as noted in the network plan, constraints downstream of Rozelle Interchange, which predate WestConnex, the capacity of the Anzac Bridge, Western Distributor and CBD limit the scale of mitigation measures which can be implemented. It's apparent that the capacity constraints on the Anzac Bridge were known to Transport at the time of the Stage 3 design process. Has any modelling been taken with respect to what impacts the Stage 3 design change would have on Anzac Bridge?
Yeah, so as I said, the initial modelling, of course, was done with the EIS, and then we did the network plan. And I might hand to my colleague, Mr. Issa, whose team did that network plan. It wasn't done by the project itself, but that plan was redoing the modelling prior to opening based on actual network experience just prior to the opening of the Rozelle Interchange. But if I can pass to Mr. Issa.
That was 2018, was it, that network plan was developed?
No, it was developed in 2023. It was required to be done just prior to the opening of the Rozelle Interchange, which opened in November 23, so it was done late 23.
So there'd been no network planning prior to that?
The EIS occurred in 17, it was approved in 18, the project was awarded at the end of 2018. There were some network integration initiatives pursued during the construction of the project, but prior to the opening, that network plan was done. And if I can hand to Mr. Issa for the
can I just
detail.
clarify, so it wasn't until 2023 that the actual micro impact, traffic impacts were really being assessed? Is that fair to say?
No, from the construction commencement, there was some network integration opportunities looked at, and some of those were developed in parallel to the delivery of the project.
But there was no plan until 2023. That's when that was.
They're separate things. There were initiatives, but the discrete task of doing the network plan was a condition of approval that was required to be done in addition to everything else just prior to the opening of the Rozelle Interchange.
I suppose, are you privy to any modelling that was done specifically with respect to Anzac Bridge concerning the Stage 3 design changes in 2015, 2016?
Well, there was significant modelling done as part of the EIS, which came out on display in 2017, and that reflected the design, which was then approved and has been delivered. Now, there were some minor modifications to the project post the main planning approval. I can take you through those if required, but the configuration of the motorway is largely reflective of what was out on display in 2017 and approved in 2018. That is what has been built.
Were the concerns of the expert review group with respect to those changes in Evans and Peck considered during that process?
I'm not familiar with what you're referring to in terms of the Evans and Peck.
The consultants that worked on the design of Stage 3 prior to the changes in 2014, 2015.
So there was the last changes that I'm aware of occurred in 2016, which were led by Sydney Motorway Corporation. They formed the basis of the EIS design, which was displayed at the end of 2017. And the traffic modelling for that EIS reflected that final design, which, as I said earlier, was the undergrounding of the interchange, the inclusion of the Iron Cove link. So that is the design that was effectively frozen and formed the basis of the EIS, and then what we have gone ahead and delivered.
So, Mr. Issa, can you clarify in terms of the extent of the traffic modelling? It seems that the backlog of traffic to the Gladesville Bridge, I'm not sure whether that was taken into account. Perhaps you could elaborate on whether in the traffic modelling that was done, that situation that exists between the Gladesville Bridge and the Iron Cove Tunnel, whether that had been anticipated.
Yeah, thank you. So, as outlined in our submission, and as Ms. Drover's outlined, the assessment of the EIS for Stage 3 did indicate increased traffic congestion in and around the inner west, including on Victoria Road. and the City West Link. So that was forecast and outlined in the EIS as an anticipated impact of stage 3 and its delivery. So it was known and it was as forecast back in 2017.
I see. The rat running was anticipated? Is that
So not the rat running. So I think from a network perspective, the EIS anticipated the congestion and delays on approach to Victoria Road and City West Link. We've worked since then to develop operational modelling. We obviously had COVID, which significantly changed driver demand and driver behaviour. We updated our work through 2021 and 2022 to understand new traffic volumes, new traffic baseline, what would we expect on opening. And as part of that process, we worked through mitigation strategies to help in preparation for the opening of the interchange. Across the full stage 3, which includes the M4 to M8 link, 21 initiatives were developed. Of those 21 initiatives, 17 have been implemented, 3 are in delivery, and 1 is yet to commence. Specifically in and around Rozelle, there are 9, and 6 of those 9 initiatives are in place today, and they're helping us manage the network. What we're seeing specifically across the network, as we predicted, it would take some time to settle in, as it has with major motorway openings over many years, be it the M4 East, the M4 West, be it the M8, the M4, M8 link. It takes time for these things to settle. People learn how to use the networks, they understand their trips, they work out what they want to do and how they want to use it. So there is always a settling in period. We obviously had a disruptive period for which we acknowledged in December. But more broadly, what we're seeing is a normality of the performance.
Surely we're at normality now, aren't
Yep.
we?
And so what we're seeing on the Victoria Road corridor today, and Mr. Knussa can talk specifically on travel time, is a return to travel times on Victoria Road to pre-opening between the Gladesville Bridge and the Anzac Bridge. Specifically, what we're seeing in Drummoyne, as the Minister's outlined, is some localised rat running.
Was that ever identified in any documentation as a potential issue?
So, not the rat running that we're seeing today.
See, that's a surprise to the department.
So what we would expect is that with congestion on a road, we would expect some delay with accessing that road. What we're actually seeing is AI in vehicle navigation trips routing people off the main corridor onto side streets to re-enter the main corridor. So what they're saying is, if you're on the main corridor, turn left or right here, duck down some side streets, go back around, do this and get back on the corridor again. Modelling at a network level or even at an intersection level can't account for individual behaviour, what AI will tell you, whether 100 people will follow that advice or 300 people will follow that advice. And so it's quite variable. So I personally was in Drummoyne yesterday morning in preparation for today. We've had a prolonged period of monitoring, and access in and out of East Drummoyne on that particular morning, acknowledge that that's not reflective of everyone's experience, I would say was not unusual with no significant delays. But in my conversations with residents and with the correspondence we're getting from residents, there are days where they're experiencing heavier delays. A lot of that can be attributed to the randomness of some rat running. So if, particularly in a local road, if you have in 1 hour an additional 100 vehicles use that particular local road at 5 metres of vehicle length, that's 500 metres of additional queuing in that local road. Now, if that traffic signal isn't configured to accommodate that increase in demand for that particular morning, that will have a significant impact on that local community's experience and how long it takes them to get in and out of their local area. On another day, if you don't have that many people go in, then it operates normally.
But it seems now that the
order,
system has...
order. No, that's the end of
we've
your
run out of
question
time,
time.
sorry.
Thank you. We'll go to questions from Ms Natalie Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again. Just getting back to the local issues. So can I just pick up on the traffic modelling point? What traffic modelling or traffic counts or impact assessments to local roads were, and when I say local roads, I mean the minor and major roads connecting to Victoria Road, and Victoria Road itself were undertaken during the design phase and prior to the opening of the interchange?
So I think Mr Drover can talk about design and I'll talk about prior to opening.
So, as I said, to inform the EIS design of 2017, which would have been frozen or effectively locked down perhaps in 2016, there would have been significant traffic modelling undertaken. It would have been strategic traffic modelling, and there would have been also some localised operational traffic modelling. That there's two types of traffic modelling. So that would have confirmed the impacts of that design, which were displayed as part of the EIS, and those impacts are quite clearly outlined within that EIS. And then if I can hand to Mr Issa for commentary on what actually occurred in 2023 prior to opening to satisfy that condition of approval 63.
Yep. Thank you, Mr Issa.
Yeah, thank you. So prior to opening, we were required to produce a pre-opening road network performance plan. So as part of that performance plan, we collected data across both the M4, M8 link and the 3B project. We shared a particular plan with Council and undertook intersection modelling and performance-based modelling based on what we saw as the current demand at those locations and what we forecast a particular performance.
On the local roads?
For the side street intersections. So there was traffic, so some of the local roads don't have intersections that we can model, but there are particular intersections that we modelled at those locations, and we also collected traffic data on those local roads.
Could you perhaps just given time take that on notice about which roads those were and which intersections?
That would
be helpful.
The plan's public, it's available on the website, so
Yep.
we can share that.
Okay. And so
and also some of the because of COVID, some of the data was actually from prior to COVID, so that we were not modelling, lower traffic models.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. So I understand that, but just if you could assist the committee with what that impact study said about rat running specifically, Mr Issa?
Yep.
And the likelihood of those local roads becoming congested and blocked with this commuter traffic, whether by AA or otherwise. What did it say about that?
So we obviously couldn't forecast what in-vehicle navigation trips would do to route people, but it did indicate a worsening of performance at key intersections as part of the opening plan, and which is why we expected and announced 6 months prior to opening, we expected heavier traffic on Victoria Road and City West Link as we normalised and managed that behaviour. And as outlined, what we're seeing today is actually a better performance than predicted.
So do you say that that's, when you talk about better than predicted, that may well be so compared to what was predicted, but given what you've also said about AI and feedback from local residents in Drummoyne specifically, is it your evidence, I just want to be clear, that that is resolved, or that's...
No, Can I just be really clear on Drummoyne? Because
yeah.
Drummoyne is not better than predicted. Drummoyne is a problem. East Drummoyne is a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this work by June to fix it.
Yeah.
I don't accept for the residents of Drummoyne, this is the new normality. It has to improve. I think with the focus that Transport is about to bring to that, I'm confident it can be improved, but we need to, because this is having an impact on people's lives.
All right, thank you. Residents are concerned, though, that they don't seem to have that consideration, so that's the reasoning for that. Can I just go to, with those residents, Minister, or Transport, the member for Drummoyne, Steph De Pasqua, did write a number of times to Transport and to you, seeking a community meeting to engage the residents and have communication with Transport. She was unable to secure A, the courtesy of a response, or B, the meeting. A meeting was subsequently granted to a Labor councillor on a Monday night upstairs at a pub, which was obviously not accessible. She found out through a constituent and was not, did end up attending, but she did write to you multiple times, Minister. She did engage with Transport multiple times and didn't seem to have the courtesy of a response or the granting of a meeting with her residents. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, look, firstly, I thank the member for advocating for her community. I recognise she's certainly done that. She's written to me a number of times. She's received a number of responses, is my understanding. I've certainly signed off on a number of those, but I'm happy to deal with any of the details of concerns about things that haven't been.
It seems that there were a number of letters that were not responded to. So there was a series of letters following up and following up, and then finally a response.
Specifics. But the member was concerned about getting access to information. She spoke to me directly, and as soon as that happened, of course I agreed that we have a community meeting
So you've
in
now
her
agreed to
area.
do that?
Well, look, I'm very open to that.
Will you commit Transport to doing so? I mean, she's sought a
Yeah.
meeting repeatedly for months and months and months. She hasn't had a response until many follow-up letters and, let's face it, potentially this committee putting a bit of pressure on, can we get a response please? But more importantly, the residents of her area would like to have a meeting with Transport. Is that something that you can commit to today?
Well, I think I'm certainly happy to commit to that occurring with Transport coming in the way they have previously in a number of communities. I think that's important. I think it's important it's Transport advice, not political advice from the government, because this is...
She just wants a meeting, Minister. Yeah. So you have agreed to do that?
Yes, I think that's totally
All right,
appropriate.
and Transport will be in touch with her about holding a community meeting. Yes?
Yeah.
Anyone? Mr. Issa?
Yes.
All right, that would be very helpful. So you personally will be supporting that, Minister, and you'll be organising that, Mr. Issa?
As per the Minister's...
Okay, great. That's very helpful, thank you. I know she and the residents would appreciate that. So residents are now advised that there's no easy fix to the problems created, but that the new Western Harbour Tunnel will solve them. What data does Transport for New South Wales have to support that claim and to reassure residents?
Thank you for the question, Ms Ward. I might ask Mr Collins, as the Coordinator General, to talk about the corridor
Mr.
itself
Collins.
and some of the arrangements being made there.
Yeah, just what will solve those problems? They've been told that Western Harbour Tunnel will solve this in time. What evidence do you have of that, and how do we support that?
Thank you very much for the question. I don't think that it will, opening the Western Harbour Tunnel won't solve all the issues, because as I think many people understand, it will relieve some of the traffic which currently has to go over the Anzac Bridge and then through the centre of Sydney and over the Harbour Bridge. And we've been working obviously to understand what that will be in the long term. In the meantime, as Mr Issa and Mr Canozza have been saying, we've been working through what we can do to minimise the impacts and try and do two things. One is encourage, obviously, people to use those alternatives. And I think, as described earlier, people have naturally done that over the 6 months. But also the other thing we have been doing is working through the public transport options, because obviously we see individuals every day driving over the Anzac Bridge in 5 metre by 2.5 metre boxes. And we're very keen to see if we can get a few of those onto public transport. But
Sure.
as
Mr.
the
Collins,
residents
I'm
have
just gonna
said,
redirect
we
you.
need decent public transport, and that's what we're working on now.
Thank you, and I appreciate you working through that. That all is sensible and makes sense, and I'm sure you're diligently doing that. But the question is specifically in relation to the claim to residents that there's Western Harbour Tunnel will ease and solve some of these problems. What is the data that Transport for New South Wales has to support that claim?
I mean, I could hand to my colleagues about the data, but we do know, as described earlier, 4 lanes in, obviously from 10 or 14 or whatever the number is, having the capacity of a new tunnel to take those people, of which I understand is about 30% of that traffic, in a new route, sadly not until 2028, but it is being built now, will help everybody in that area.
Sure,
but I
but do you
don't
have
think it's the
data?
solution.
All right,
But
now I understand, but Mr. Issa, is there something
some of my
that's based
colleagues
on?
may have information
Yeah.
which have the modelling on that
Assurance has
area.
been made to the community, this will ease it, just they want to understand what you base that on.
Ms Strobe is probably the best person.
Yeah, so the Western Harbour Tunnel EIS outlined the impact on the network with and without the project, Western Harbour Tunnel, and that shows the benefit of the project on the Rozelle Interchange, but more specifically on the Anzac Bridge, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Sydney Harbour Tunnel, and the Western Distributor.
Yep.
So those percentage improvements are all outlined in the EIS. There's about a 10% improvement, which is material across the network for the AM peak.
Okay, just on that percentage, and thank you, that's very helpful and very specific. In relation to percentages, specifically in relation to Victoria Road, do we have any data on what percentage presently traffic using Victoria Road through Des Moines will divert to the new Harbour Tunnel, and who in Transport is determining this?
Sorry, the question is about who on Victoria will use Western Harbour Tunnel.
Yeah, so what percentage of traffic presently on Victoria Road is predicted to go through in Drummoyne, will divert through the Harbour Tunnel, and who's making all that? That's the assurance that's been made to the community.
No, exactly.
So we'll have
What
to
will
take the
happen in
specific numbers off that. I think what Ms Travers outlined is that a 10% reduction in demand across the Anzac Bridge Western Distributor. The key main constraint for the whole corridor is the Anzac Bridge Western Distributor. Improving the performance of the Anzac Bridge and Western Distributor and moving that demand into the Western Harbour Tunnel from further afield will improve the way the Rozelle Interchange and the Anzac Bridge performs. That will then in turn help manage journey times through the inner west, because we've actually reduced the overall demand.
All right, can I ask you to take that specific one on notice though, and happy for you to come back on that percentage.
Ms Ward, can I suggest we take that, because also
Yeah.
since the EIS has been the changes to Beaches Link and other roads, so
Yes,
we'd want to make sure
sadly.
that was the most modern.
Thank you.
Yes, just on Western Harbour Tunnel, actually, and you just said it, Mr Murray, that there have been changes in terms of no Beaches Link now, as well as, of course, the metro stations. Why isn't this now being completely reviewed in terms of the business case for the Western Harbour Tunnel and the Warringah Freeway upgrades? Why isn't, given there is just substantial changes, why isn't it being reviewed, Minister?
Yeah, look, I think I have been briefed on some of the evidence this morning, so I'll make these couple of points. Firstly, we need the Western Harbour Tunnel to provide resilience for the traffic network when there are issues on the Harbour Bridge and the Harbour Tunnel. It's actually very important to keep the city moving to have that crossing. It will make an improvement here. I accept Mr Collins' advice that this won't solve everything. Absolutely, I think that's the lesson we've learned here. That work is already underway for the Western Harbour Tunnel. What we are doing is doing the careful assessment of the traffic network to make sure that we learn the lessons of exactly what's happened at the Rozelle Interchange. We've got some time to do that between now and 2028.
Well, I think some of the witnesses this morning, very senior former RTA officials and consultants, planners that were deeply involved in WestConnex, the original designs and traffic modelling. One of them, Mr. Les Wallinger, said it was going to be a bloody disaster. The Warringah upgrade and Western Harbour Tunnel, when that opens, it's going to be a bloody disaster for the people of North Sydney. And they're giving evidence. They gave evidence because of what they saw rolling out because of the Rozelle Interchange. So what's happening to stop it being a bloody disaster?
Chair, can I just assure the committee that having heard some of Mr Wallinger's evidence this morning and his colleagues and former members of RMS, I'd be very keen to ensure that our technical experts, our design teams for Western Harbour Tunnel and Warringah Freeway upgrade have a full view of the elements that Mr Wallinger has put forward, and I'd commit us to meeting with him in the near future to really work through that and understand some of his comments so that we get all of those views, as we also look at, as the Minister has said, the latest plans for north of the bridge, because they have changed over recent times, and we also want to bake in what we've seen from Rozelle into that plan.
Well, thank you, Mr Murray. On that note, we heard from the Mayor of North Sydney Council, who also put a submission into this inquiry that she told this inquiry that to this day we have not yet had any practical discussions with Transport for New South Wales about what they expect to do and what could be practically done now to avert the sorts of things that we have seen at Rozelle. That community is extremely concerned. Everything we're seeing does indicate that exactly the same thing is going to happen. So firstly, why is North Sydney Council so disappointed in the consultation that Transport for New South Wales is doing with them?
I'd have to take that on notice in terms of the specific concerns of North Sydney, but I am aware that we've received representations and have held meetings with North Sydney.
Just on the differences, though, I think there is one key difference. What you're coming up against in Rozelle is the limits of what a motorway network can deliver to the city. It's having a positive impact on the road network. Ultimately, we need to invest in public transport to move large numbers of people. That's the government's plan in the medium term.
I agree.
North
In
Sydney,
terms of the
in
public
North Sydney,
transport,
the fact that there is very significant public transport right there about to have an impact in this time frame will be one of the things that will make a difference here.
so even for example, there's upgrades, obviously North Sydney Station, but the impacts of Metro West in terms of that getting people onto Metro West, that hasn't been factored in to any of this modelling, has it? And why can't it be?
So can I? Yeah, so as the Minister said, the deletion of Beaches Link was confirmed late last year. When that occurred, we are obviously now looking at what the impact of that is, and we're also updating the analysis that was done for the Western Harbour EIS for today's current network situation. So when the Western Harbour Tunnel EIS was done, for example, the other motorway, some of the other motorway projects, and also the timing of Metro West. So we're updating that for current network.
What does that mean, though, updating? Because ideally, so what we've heard is that what hasn't happened with WestConnex and the Rozelle Interchange is, of course, look at ways in which we can, the government should be investing in other projects and how that will take cars off the road, and that instead, in fact, I think the traffic modelling was called a predict and provide modelling instead of the one where you're supposed to actually get rid of demand and put more public transport in place. So what does that mean when you say the government is reviewing the impact of Metro West? Does that mean a complete reconsideration of the necessity for Western Harbour Tunnel based on what should be ideally less people driving in their cars?
No, what I said was we're just updating the impact of the deletion of Beaches Link, and although it was considered in the EIS for Western Harbour Tunnel in the first place, we're looking at what that means today in the context of what's happening around the network, including all the other public transport projects that are, as the Minister said, are about to be delivered or are in delivery.
And from a government point of view, as we were elected, that decision had been made, that investment decision about the Western Harbour Tunnel. We have fulfilled our election commitment to not build the Beaches Link, the extra toll road for which the investment decision had not been made. We should work and learn the lessons out of Rozelle Interchange before the Western Harbour Tunnel opens. It is needed, but I'm certain that building that additional toll road would not have
Minister, I think the
assisted
lessons
here.
of Rozelle Interchange is that it was a complete disaster and shouldn't have been designed and open in the first place. You're the government now. You can actually make a decision in relation to the Western Harbour Tunnel and the impact that opening is going to have on North Sydney. Are you going to do anything to alleviate Rozelle Interchange 2.0 being imposed on North Sydney residents?
Well, I expect transport to learn the lessons. I expect the public transport will make a difference here. I don't expect... I expect this to be a better result, but that work is already underway. We are building the Western Harbour Tunnel at the moment. It is needed to have that additional harbour crossing, and we won't be stopping the construction at great cost to public taxpayers.
Is it in a contract, I assume, that the work can't stop? The government would have to, I assume, compensate Transurban for a hell of a lot of money if they did?
It wouldn't be Transurban, but of course, yes, if we were to stop a contract like that midway, governments can always make those decisions. It will have serious implications for the state, financial impacts for taxpayers, and they will be at a large level to stop this work that's already underway. You're correct.
Can I just... there's a lot of questions to ask about a lot of different things, but the Victoria Road revitalisation, why hasn't that occurred? Why doesn't the community know when that is going to commence? That's what they were promised as part of this entire project. and they're very disappointed that they just don't know what is happening with Victoria Road. Similarly, no, we'll stick with Victoria Road.
As I think the Chair, you might acknowledge, I've been focused here on solutions to make this work as best it can. I've been trying not to point the finger at former decisions. However, it is a total mystery to me how ministers in the former government were telling the public that traffic was going to drop significantly on Victoria Road and that we would be able to make these improvements that have been floated publicly, including in the weeks before the election. That was never the briefing to me. When I was briefed, it was clear there would be significant impacts on Victoria Road. I was public about that as soon as I could be. In August last year, I was clear about that.
You know,
it's
like
just
a boulevard.
Not possible.
Where did those designs come from?
It's not possible to have a boulevard on Victoria Road at the moment, given the traffic numbers that are there, where people are slowing down. I'm open to any improvements we can make in the corridor. I'd like to get on to do them, but the modelling that's been presented to me just doesn't show what those former promises were can be met in the very short term. We need to deliver on them in the medium term.
Questions from government members now. Mr Diatta.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Driver, you may wish to take this one on notice too, but in 2021, the Audit Office prepared a report titled WestConnex Changes Since 2014. Those changes being the Camperdown Interchange and the conception of the Rozelle Interchange. It stated that Transport for New South Wales, and I quote, documented but did not publish the rationale for the design changes. Can you provide the committee with any guidance on what the rationale was or might have been?
Look, I can't, but I'm happy to take away and see what we can bring back. I think the use of transport probably may have been misleading as well, because at the time of the design changes, it would have been City Motorway Corporation.
Okay, thank you. Minister, looking forward, can you advise the committee of what is being prepared to try and keep improving things from here?
Yeah, so look, we've been as specific as we can be about what the performance is at the moment, but I accept we should continue to make the best of this that we can, further improvements where we can. The first of those is those Drummoyne, that Drummoyne study, that important work. I want that done by June so that we can tackle that problem that is an issue, rat running in Drummoyne. There are still some further changes that are happening around the network that the advice to me is these will have a positive impact. Briefly, they're the Western Distributor Smart Motorway. That system that's worked really well on the M4, we're applying to the Western Distributor. There are changes at the Harris Street and Allen Street intersection. They're of some concern to the local community, but they will have an impact on this in a positive way. And also at the Piermont Bridge Road intersection. So there's further work that should lead to some improvements. There's also some things that we won't do that have been part of the public discussion. One of those is this question about slowing drivers down as they come in from Parramatta or Liverpool and getting them to slow down. There's two issues with that. One is that it's inherently unpredictable when they'll arrive at the other end and whether that'll actually make any difference. But also there's potentially a safety issue, is the briefing to me, about asking people to queue in the tunnels where possible. So that's out of the, that isn't something that's being recommended to me. But secondly, the idea of asking people to slow down altogether. And I will make it clear that the government will not be asking motorists coming in from Penrith or from Liverpool to be driving at a slower rate through these tunnels. I was very surprised to see the opposition spokesperson agreeing to this proposition on radio that we might ask these drivers to travel at 50 kilometres an hour.
Here, John. Don't verbally. This is your problem to fix, and you need to think about solutions.
That is not something that the government will be considering.
That's desperate.
Mr. So I want to come back to you. So,
Desperate.
2018 EIS, you knew that there'd be an impact on Drummoyne. You knew it would be bad. Now you're saying that it's not as bad as you anticipated. Is that a fair kind of summation of the position in terms of where once the traffic the impact of the opening has settled down and you've had an ability to tweak the system. The journey times, you're saying, between the Gladesville Bridge and the Rozelle tunnel are better than you anticipated. That's a fair summation of what you're saying?
So I might hand to my colleague, Mr. Knutzer, but to be clear, we still have challenges with rat running in Drummoyne, which we're going to work through. But at a more broader network, I might hand to Mr. Knutzer to talk through journey times and travel times.
Okay, yes, Mr.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So on, and this is part of our submission, so on the travel times for Victoria Road between Gladesville Bridge and Anzac Bridge, we have seen settling down, if you like, where travel time is sitting around 28 minutes for that period. I've got updated information for the month of, the 28 minutes was February and March data in the morning peak. The updated data I've now got, which is for the whole month of March, is down to 25 minutes. So I think that talks to the fact that the network is a living, breathing network, and there's different, travel times across different.
So can you explain to what extent those better travel times has been achieved as a result of changing the signal scheduling on the north-south intersections on Victoria Road?
So these times that I'm referring to are along Victoria Road corridor specifically, and they are obviously done on a daily basis to manage.
Yes, my question was, to what extent was the improved times achieved by adjustments to the interval times for the traffic signals along that Victoria Road corridor?
So there are some instances where we haven't touched the signals. I'll need to go through get some specific details and take that on notice about specific
Is that one of the strategies that you use to improve the travel times?
It's not, no, it is sometimes in some intersections we would have made changes, in some we would have adjusted the signals.
My question was that one of the strategies that you've used?
It's one of the strategies we use for managing any busy corridor, so it's not unusual to do that. I think when we visited the Transport Management Centre, we were able to demonstrate, where we play with the timings of traffic signals. When I say play, I don't mean, have fun with it. It's very much around how do we maximise and optimise the movements at every one of those intersections so we can balance the network. In the Victoria Road corridor, obviously, we're looking at balancing through traffic and cross-regional traffic, as well as those local trips. And as we've discussed today at length, the Drummoyne local traffic issues is something that is,
That'll all be picked up in the traffic studies.
Absolutely.
That
Exactly right.
Yes. But I think, to be clear, we haven't done anything with the traffic signals in Drummoyne that substantially changes egress from the local community onto Victoria Road. So it's not at the expense of access to and from those local.
There's been no changes.
No, mate. There's been
between
tweaking.
The opening of the.
There's been changes to the way the corridor performs and the way that the traffic signals on the corridor work for the main thoroughfare, but no significant change in the egress from side streets in that Drummoyne community post-opening. The optimisation work we've been doing is about how to balance the flows from different approaches, Victoria Road and the City West Link, onto the limited capacity of the Anzac Bridge and Western Distributor, and how we manage that flow to optimise the performance of the whole network, but it's not been to the detriment of local access in Drummoyne.
So that's not the perception of the residents, is it? That they are saying that the north-south egress has been significantly diminished.
Yep, and I think that goes
Why
back.
do they have that perception if there's been no changes to the signals?
So I think that goes back to the rat running. So what we're seeing is through AI, and we need to understand the quantum of this rat running and whether it's different on different days, more people getting off the main corridor because they feel it's quicker to use the side street to get to ahead of the queue and get back onto the main corridor. Traditionally, rat running would be you live in an area and you use the side streets to get to the main arterial, but you bypass a section of the main arterial. Not that you travel on the main arterial, turn left, turn right, and then turn left again to get back onto the main arterial. And so what we're seeing is some localised rat running through trip planners that are getting people to use local roads in the Drummoyne area. And as I outlined, if 100 people do that in 2 hours, and at 5 metre vehicle length, that's an additional 500 metres of queuing in those local roads. And if that occurs and those traffic lights aren't designed to accommodate that demand, it will lock up that local area. And so we acknowledge that that's what they're experiencing. And that's what we want to work through and understand, and trying to design with them and council about how we address that concern and how we minimise that occurring without impacting local access.
I think, Mr. Diadam, if I could just add that this is the unique element that we are now dealing with 6 months in, the sophistication of travel mapping that's available to almost every motorist is not uniform to what we would do in the Transport Management Centre, and it's different to what has been seen in any other motorway opening where it has not had that level of intervention from technology that is now taking effect. Our hierarchy, if you like, has been to keep that entire corridor moving, because once we get to the Anzac Bridge, we have a capacity of 6,000 vehicles an hour, and that has to be sacred to keep the whole of the city moving, including Victoria Road and Drummoyne. The element that is the unique part here is the rat running is occurring on a peninsula, as you're aware, and as a result there is no other out point, whereas rat running for other motorways that has gone off into suburbs has then not been contained by those suburbs.
Just one last question to Mr. Issa. So the previous government promised 50% reduction of traffic on Victoria Road. Was that your advice that they relied on to make that assertion?
Sorry, in Rozelle,
on Victoria Road.
So I think
has there been a 50% reduction then?
In Rozelle, I think Mr. Knutzer and yeah.
In the Rozelle component, so where we know motorists are using the inner west, the Iron Cove Link tunnel,
and
there
what
is a
about
reduction of surface. There's a reduction of surface traffic by 50%.
Questions from the opposition now, Ms. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, when were you first briefed on the Western Distributor Network Improvement Plan?
Look, I'd have to take on notice the exact date, but I was certainly briefed about the impact of this project on the Western Distributor.
Early in your term, recently,
look,
prior to the opening?
Certainly prior to the opening, yeah. It would have been in the middle of last year, but I'd have to take on notice the specific dates.
Mid-year, June?
I'd have to take on notice the specific dates.
The Western Distributor Network Improvement Plan went to community consultation with a start of works for Q3 2023. Why, Q2 in 2023, that was the plan. Why in Q3 2024 has work not started, and what is the total budget for those works?
Yeah, look, I'll refer to the agency on some of these detailed questions, but that there certainly are some of those integration works taking place. When I was briefed, it was clear that there had been significant plans in the past that hadn't proceeded, that if they had may have mitigated some of these.
Work hasn't started. When will it start? What's the budget?
Yeah, well, I'll just hand to Ms. Drover on those.
Okay, I can talk to the status and then I might hand to my colleague Mr. Issa for the funding. So the three components that we're currently looking at is the intersection at Allen Street and Harris Street. We're waiting on the relocation of the utilities, so that is proceeding. The major civil works we are preparing to commence later this year, subject to those utility relocations. As we said earlier, the works to Piedmont Bridge Road, we're going to wait till the fish markets are complete and open. That was always the plan. And we're still looking at the design for the Fig Street Weave ramp.
Thank you. Why is it so late, though? Or is it being delayed?
It hasn't been delayed. As I said, the Piedmont Bridge Road was always to be done when the fish markets are open. Allen Street, we had to determine the REF, and you'll be aware there was significant community feedback to the REF, so that was determined last year. And we're always
But it was slated for Q2 2023, so are you saying it was delayed or it's changed since that time, or the program of works has changed since
the scope of the Allen Street intersection hasn't changed, but we are waiting on those utility relocations, and we have been doing some further work on that Fig Street Weave ramp.
When you say further work, does that mean design change?
Design, we did commence the property acquisition some time ago. I can't remember exactly when. We're just looking at the safety and ensuring there are no safety concerns about that Fig Street ramp. What we are also doing, of course, is getting on with the Western Sydney Smart Motorways program. It's fully funded. That should be complete by the end of this year.
What's the budget for it?
For the Smart Motorways?
Western Distributor Network Improvement Plan.
I'd have to turn
Or
to
you
my
can give us
colleague.
both.
Probably have to take it on notice. I don't have the figure to hand, but we'll take it on notice.
For both projects.
Okay, yep. But to be clear, we did deliver works at Allen Street, so we did what we could without the major civil works.
But the plan was, Q2. It's now well over a year after that. Just wondering what's changed. Has it been delayed? Is there budget constraints? Understand the utilities issue, but the balance
it's just
of
general
it?
progress.
Yeah, it is funded. I can't recollect the exact number, but those
take
three
that on notice
initiatives
for
are
both.
funded.
Thank you. And so in terms of Victoria Road, so Transport measures and publishes transit times along Victoria Road from Gladesville Bridge to Anzac Bridge. Does Transport presently or in the future plan to measure what time it takes local residents to get from onto Victoria Road from those local roads, for example, from Lyons Road to Victoria Road? Will it be measuring that as part of this traffic plan, or does it presently do that?
I'll let you answer first, Secretary, then I'll make a comment.
Ms Ward, the publication of those statistics was an initiative that was brought in, obviously recognising the substantial community concern about some of the travel times, and we wanted to ensure that people could track those in real time and along with us, see the benefit of some of the changes.
Understand
in
all
regards
of that,
to
but
the
is
work
it being tracked specifically, so just with time, is it being tracked specifically in relation to the time it takes local residents to get onto
Can I
Victoria
just answer
Road?
Ms Ward to say that releasing that data I think is really important for the public. If the committee wanted to recommend that's something we should continue to do in the way you're suggesting, I think Transport would endeavour to make that possible as part of the work that's being done.
Yes, but my question, to be clear, and you can take it on notice, is that presently being done or is it planned to be done? We can make recommendations, but that's months away.
We'll take it on notice.
Yeah.
You take on notice whether it's being done and whether it will be done. Thank you.
Minister, is it your understanding that back in 2016, so once Rozelle Interchange was designed and we've heard today amended to ensure more vehicles and more tolls would use it, increasing the sale price of WestConnex, that once it was sold, that there was really nothing anybody could do to stop the design of or to stop Rozelle Interchange?
Yeah, well, look, as an incoming minister, I know the committee's heard evidence that this was the wrong decision, the wrong design. I can't go and redesign this road.
But what I'm
I
asking
can do is
about
try
in
and make
terms
these
of
improvements.
what happened at the
and we're committed to
time,
doing
it
that.
was put into a contract, I understand. Is that your understanding as well, that the Rozelle Interchange was put into a contract with the government in terms of the sale of that, and therefore Rozelle Interchange was done and dusted?
Yeah, well, the decision, as we came to government, those decisions had been made. There were contracts in place, as you're observing. Those contractual arrangements are obviously complex, but there's no way to revisit the design now. There's no way to revisit the design back as we came
Yeah,
into
so
government.
back in 2015, 2016, Rozelle Interchange, that the design happened, the government essentially sold WestConnex. In that contract was the Rozelle Interchange needs to be built or there will be massive compensation needing to be paid to Transurban. Is that your
I might
understanding?
ask Transport to answer on the contracting details. I know there have been some questions about the compensation arrangements, including the committee asking to see some of those deeds.
Yes, because that's what we've got.
Yeah.
4 pages of that. That's the compensation arrangements.
And
We don't know
I
what
saw
they
the committee questioning on that, and I'm happy to table the unredacted copy, which the committee would be in a position to make public.
Thank you very much.
Of those deeds. To my understanding, that is as it was characterised in the earlier committee hearings. But I accept that it's in the public interest to be able to see that.
Thank you very much. I have only under 3 minutes, so I won't go to the departmental officials. I'll get on to another issue. We've heard a lot from active transport advocates about what they have said is a pretty disastrous outcome in terms of cycleways, active transport provisions. We've had 2 overpasses that were good for foot traffic as well as cycling removed. We've got evidence about the active transport routes being unsafe, currently 102 poles in the cycleway in the 1.2 kilometres from the Iron Cove Bridge to the City West Link. Cyclists are saying it's a complete disaster. What is happening to improve this? What they're saying, the evidence before this committee is that the conditions of consent have not been met when it comes to the provision of active transport infrastructure. We're very clear on that. We've got evidence about that. Minister, what are you doing to ensure that this is fixed and it's fixed very quickly?
Those cycling groups have written to me, and I was concerned to see their evidence to the committee. Obviously, there's been big disruptions to the cycling network during the construction, but I was concerned to see how they feel about this going forward. I'm committed to meeting with them and working through those issues, but I might have to ask Transport to comment on the conditions of consent.
And Mr Esser, can you address that?
Thank you. So I think from a project perspective, about what the project was required to deliver and what community expectations are, we've delivered 14 kilometres of new and improved active transport links across through the Rozelle Parklands, new underpasses and connections to the City West Link and Victoria Road and the Anzac Bridge. We've actually removed the divide of the City West Link.
Can I just check, is it all complete?
So,
is the work complete?
So from a Rozelle 3B, there's some finishing touches. We've got some work to do along. We will do. So I think
Okay.
the question is around conditions of approval.
I might get it on notice in terms of everything that you've done. Minister, are you aware that the Biennale of Sydney had to make the decision to not promote getting to the Biennale by bicycle due to safety concerns?
Look, I've had extensive discussions with the Biennale around their transport planning for that event. I think you're referring to one of their events at the White Bay Power Station. There's been a range of complex transport issues, including some issues with cycling.
So they said the designated bike paths are not secure, with substantial risks involved. That's the announcement that they put out to the community. Why is that? I mean, again, we've just heard shocking evidence about the state of those bike paths, making it, everybody's saying we need to get people out of cars, but riding a bike now around Balmain is not a safe thing to do.
I am concerned about the evidence before the committee in relation to some of these areas, including for cyclists, but also including for pedestrian safety around that area, including Robert Street. So I have taken those issues seriously that have been raised.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Chair, can I...
We are out of time. No, we're not out of time. Sorry,
5 minutes. 5 minutes,
sorry,
yeah.
I thought we were.
Minister, just on that previous line of question where I think you started to touch on the Victoria Road issue, what do you suppose the input decisions to the previous minister regarding the 50% reduction on Victoria Road, the traffic, where do you suppose he got the intel for that?
Well, look, I think you've heard some of the transport evidence there that a very short section of Victoria Road, and it is a very short section as people are going into the Iron Cove tunnel, has seen traffic drop potentially to that amount. The issue was the community expectation, and I've got to say as a close observer, my expectation, based on the former comments, was that Victoria Road itself would see these 50% reductions in traffic, and that is just not what has happened. That was the community view. The community is now rightly saying we expected a boulevard, we expected these improvements because the traffic was going to disappear. Instead, it's been slower over these 6 months to get to work. So I understand their disappointment. I never saw modelling which suggested it was going to be, as had been suggested, much, much better right along Victoria Road. We'll now have to, I hope there will be a chance to do that, and I believe there will be a second go at this as the Western Harbour Tunnel opens, but we need to get that right so that the community can have what they were promised.
So you would as the incoming minister, if there was modelling that showed there was supposed to be a 50% reduction, you would have been briefed about that, wouldn't you?
When I was briefed, the briefing was, as I've described in public, in the middle of last year. This will be slower. We're expecting significant traffic delays because there are more cars on Victoria Road. That was the advice to me, and I was immediately public with it because it was the opposite of what I had understood from the some of the ministers, and I think not the minister who is here now, but I didn't understand why those comments had been made, given what I was shown.
And the evidence we heard this morning from the former CEO of the RTA regarding the fact that way back in 2015 they were aware that the Anzac Bridge was already overloaded, yet notwithstanding that, plough ahead. What do you make of that?
Well, look, it's very concerning evidence. My focus is it's very concerning evidence, but it doesn't help the public. My focus is on getting some solutions here. We can continue to improve this, but we need to.
I want to ask Mr. Issa about sort of touching on the issues raised by my colleague around community perception. There was an understanding that the traffic volumes on, or the traffic delays on Victoria Road in Drummoyne would increase. The community seemed to be surprised by that. What consultation was undertaken in anticipation of those impacts with the community in Drummoyne? And I suppose my follow-on question would be, what lessons can be learnt? What can we do different in terms of approaches to community consultation in the future?
So thank you. So I think from a network broader community perspective, in reality, what we're seeing today as those issues are not what we predicted. That the rat running and the AI and people actually getting off Victoria Road to use a local road only to get back on that same road again a couple hundred metres down the road is not what we forecast. What we expected was some heavier traffic on Victoria Road, which would impact access from the side streets somewhat, but not significantly. And in Transport, we didn't do anything that would have significantly changed their access from those side streets. So the specific engagement was engaging with the broader community, and we ran a pretty comprehensive engagement strategy at a network level. So the Minister was out, the Secretary, the Coordinator General was out from August, talking about disruption, the 6 months to settle in. On top of that, we ran an advertising campaign throughout November, December, January, February, and we had millions of views. We had reaches across Greater Sydney more broadly. And in October, we launched video animation, drive animations to help people learn and educate their truth. So we built a campaign to help inform people of what to expect. And we think that worked more broadly. But what we're hearing and what we're seeing is that those specific local issues in Drummoyne were not identified, and we don't believe, in hindsight, AI now is a challenge. We have to think about how we address that and what that will be. And we have to get now deep dive into what that means for future projects and what are some of the things we have to now forecast based on these mapping in vehicles that will tell people in real time whether they save 2 minutes by ducking down a side street, zooming down that side street and trying to get back on the main road again at the next set of traffic lights. And that's something we have to take away and think about how we address for future motorway project openings or any infrastructure opening, and how can we engage with communities about that.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Fortunately for you, unfortunately for us, we're out of time. That's also the end of our hearing today. So thank you very much for appearing. We really do appreciate it, Minister and the public servants. The committee will be in touch, of course, with any questions you've taken on notice, as well as any supplementary questions that the committee members may have. Thank you again, and that's the end of our hearing.
Great. Thank you.